Yuri was the third prince of Bryle, yet he fell into ruin, losing his country and his home, pursued by enemies. Before that, he was betrayed by Catherine, the woman of his dreams, who joined forces with the enemy to push him into the abyss. And finally, he met his end by the sword of an unnamed knight. Justice favored the weak, and Yuri was reborn, resurrected at the age of 13. So what will Yuri do to turn the tide, correct the mistakes of his past? And can the kingdom of Bryle thus overcome the threat of destruction? Let us follow this fascinating Septurai together with Academy Manhwa. The Septurai begins in a small house covered in layers of white snow. A conversation is taking place between two men. Have you heard that rumor? Lately, a madman has been wandering the battlefield. They say he has soulless eyes, especially for a mercenary, and after every battle, he disappears to find the next one. A mercenary who does not care about his life. How strange, but that madman always mutters, "He survived again." They say he always appears in battles related to the Empire. People say he fights not for money, but for Picasnu revenge. AT's chilling just to hear about AT. Who is that madman? After all, rumor has AT. He is the prince of a kingdom that was destroyed. Perhaps, they say he is always looking for a place to die. After being severely wounded from a recent battle, the prince received a question from his opponent. Self-destruction. Is that the answer you came up with? The third prince of Bryle. Yuri Bryle, that Yuri Bryle, the disgraceful name who destroyed his own kingdom with his own hands. And that criminal, the sole survivor of the destroyed kingdom. 10 years ago, he was at a casino. He exclaimed joyfully while playing a game of chance, "I am really lucky today." Royal magician Hernando expressed his disbelief. "Incredible. How do you always win?" Others chimed in. AT's just luck. Do you think I am any different? What? Are you all getting up already? Why not play another round? Yuri excitedly raised the stakes. Let us double the bet this time. But Hernando refused bluntly. Let us go. If we stay here any longer, we will be late for our appointment. At the same time, a voice full of anger suddenly appeared. We are being nice to you. Why do not you just get lost? Do you think we do not know you are cheating? Using such petty tricks? 80's ridiculous. Yuri could not hold back and retorted bluntly. Petty. Who do you think I am? They continued to mock him. Judging by the way you act, you are definitely not a noble. Are you the king of this country or something? A king. If he were really royalty, I would not let him off so easily. Am I right? Provoking the empire for no reason. Escalating the war. Who can stand AT? Even the princes are the same. Like father. Like son. Useless. From the start, what can a family that is only good at wielding swords do? Faced with Yuri's actions, they asked in bewilderment, what is AT? He stepped forward and declared loudly. Listen carefully, you three idiots. I am the third prince of Bryle. Yuri Bryle. And today, you will be reborn thanks to me. They were finally punished properly. At this time, AT was getting dark, and the man who had just met Princess Catherine of Varna Grandzain of the Empire hastily announced, I am late because my father had an urgent meeting. I informed you through the communication device. What I mean is, can you forgive me this time? But she deliberately emphasized, do you think you are the only one who has trouble making time? Do you know how far I had to go, sneaking past everyone's eyes to get here, which made him immediately lower his voice. I understand, but please understand my situation. Because my father is not in office right now, I have to be careful for a while. Actually, I am not even allowed to tell this to anyone. Hearing this, Catherine gave a sly smile. Oh, am I just anyone in your eyes? Causing Yuri to try to explain. No, that is not it. Unexpectedly, Catherine resolutely threw the necklace on the ground. If you do not trust me that much, then why did you give this to me? Why not give it to another woman you trust more? Do not contact me until I initiate high. Yuri then called O in confusion. Wait. Catherine. But she decided to leave, leaving him feeling confused. What should I do? Tai's going to be difficult to make amends with her this time. The masked man who was observing their conversation gave a smug smile. From that day on, the already fragile relationship between Bryle and the Empire reached its breaking point. Provocative actions from the Empire began to cross the line, and the conflict between the two countries began to spiral out of control. Yuri then exclaimed in panic. "It's an invasion. The Empire has invaded Bryal. Everyone. Evacuate immediately. Inform all the people near the castle to leave quickly." Finally, the war with the Empire officially began. Yuri was helpless as he stood before the sea of fire. After many eras and countless sacrifices, the war showed no signs of stopping. Yuri called out to his brother in despair. "Brother Joshua," only to receive the report, "Prince, we must evacuate immediately," causing him to ask back in despair. "The reinforcements have not arrived yet." The strongest force of Bryal. What the people called the strongest throughout the continent. All because of the absence of one man. The balance of war gradually tilted towards the Empire. At first, Yuri called it a coincidence and ignored Atai. Perhaps he could deny the reality he did not want to believe was true. However, when he remembered the life and death battles he had experienced, and his reason gradually returned, he could only come to one conclusion. Catherine's betrayal. The only person Yuri had told everything to. The time when his father left Bryal was also when the Empire began its ruthless invasion. He had hoped that the strange coincidence was just his paranoia. But the answer to the letter he had struggled to send to Catherine was just. Yuri's eyes could not hide his shock when he saw the two words. Nothing but despair. At the same time, his whereabouts were discovered with a shout. "There he is, the Prince of Bryal. Capture him and Bryal is finished." Yuri, facing that dangerous situation, kept complaining. Why does this keep happening? He stepped forward and slashed strongly at the opponent's sword, then quickly killed one opponent, then continued to fight with the second one. Then another reckless one also lost his life to Yuri's sword. His body was trembling violently. But he did not give up because of Atai. Yuri continued to fight. After defeating this Jita Rup of people, he turned around and discovered others. They seemed to be trained with enduring fighting strength. Yuri glanced at the opponents. Then a thought full of despair appeared. Damn, is this the end? He still decided to risk his life and rush into the crowd. While facing the enemy, Yuri carelessly dropped his sword. He seemed to have intended to give up, then unexpectedly received help in a critical situation. After regaining his composure, Yuri turned his head to look back, then discovered that his savior was Roland. He kept begging while seriously injured. "Please survive, Prince." Yuri could only call out helplessly. Roland. When he saw him sacrifice himself for him. Another soldier, seeing his despair, patiently advised, "A's no use. Please run, Prince. If anything happens to you, Bryal will have no future. Hurry, run, Prince." His enemies were still urging each other. "The Prince of Bryal is running away. Catch him." They chased him to a small house in the forest with the assessment. "He can't have gone far. Find the prince quickly." Yuri was indeed hiding in the house. He kept calculating, "I can't keep hiding in here forever. Somehow I have to break through the encirclement and plan for the future. I wonder how Father is doing now." The fact that Father has not returned yet means that Father has been killed by the Empire. The door in front of him suddenly opened. An assassin slowly entered, causing Yuri to feel extremely afraid. "No, if I die here, the future of Bryal will." Then he humbled himself and pleaded, "Please spare me. If I die here, Bryal will be completely unable to resist." What I want to say is, unexpectedly, he received the answer. I won't explain at length. The crimes that the Empire has committed will have to be paid for. Before long, soldiers of the Empire will flood this place. So leave. Yuri, having escaped outside, tried to run away at maximum speed. He kept telling himself, "No matter what, I have to survive. I have to live to restore Bryal and avenge the Empire." However, my ideals were nothing but naive arrogance. The reality is cruelly unexpected. In the end, everyone died. All that bloodshed. What was AT for after all? Now I do not even have a reason to justify ATI. Yes, now I wield a sword only to punish myself. One day, someone will appear. Someone who will end me. After Yuri was severely injured, the enemy mocked. "People say you are looking for a place to die. So the reason you rush into the most dangerous battlefields, recklessly charging without regard for life and death, is just so you can rest. Self-destruction is the best answer you could come up with. You are selfish to the core." Even death is too good a reward for someone like you, the third prince of Brial. Yuri Brial. He loudly provoked upon hearing this. That sounds noble. While your eyes look like you want to kill me right now. Finish AD. Yuri secretly thought. Anyone who knows my past should be dead already. He continued. All of this is because of you. Everything. All these tragedies are all because of you alone. Yuri suddenly realized. Roland. That voice is definitely him. But he died back then. How could AT be? He drew his sword and continued. The reason why the kingdom of Brial fell was because of the Empire's cheap schemes. The oath and honor of the Flanger family. Those who were always loyal to the royal family. And both my dignity and faith. All shattered in that moment. Yuri Brial. That sorrowful call made him secretly realize. Someone who should have died, now returns in the form of a vengeful spirit. Only to question my past mistakes. My sins. Damn me. I thought my heart would be a little lighter if I died. This damn feeling of guilt weighs heavily on me even in my final moments. The hero of Brial never abandons honor, even when dead. After falling asleep, he was awakened by a loud call. Yuri Brial. While he was still bewildered because he did not understand what was happening, he continued to hear a warm voice. You have not opened your eyes for 3 days. Are you alright? Yuri unconsciously uttered. Father. He also began to calm down to recall his memories. My father, who has passed away, is it possible? Then Yuri tried to ask. So finally, father also fell into hell. He tried to ask again, not understanding what his son was trying to say. What? Yuri hesitated for a long time, then declared strongly, for someone who always talks about honor, your life is really unrestrained. He still did not understand what was happening and said loudly, what the hell are you talking about? Yuri still firmly insisted, even after going to hell, can't you get rid of your habits? Repent. At least for now. He glanced to the window and paused for a long time. They are not there. The atmosphere here was still extremely peaceful. Only the servants were happily chatting, causing Yuri to wake up. I do not see them. If this is hell, then there should be sinners and the terrifying flames of purgatory. Demons should be mocking and torturing me too. Wait, then this place is... He suddenly became drowsy and staggered, causing everyone to call low in panic. Yuri. Yuri Brial. He had returned to the time when he was 13 years old. At first, Yuri thought it was a dream, or a long memory. But no matter how hard he tried, he still could not wake up. The world did not end. Instead, the old scenarios buried deep in his memory kept repeating, and Yuri could not admit it. The truth was that he had returned to the past. Back to the spring of his 13th year. The truth was that he had another chance. The next morning, the servant entered the room and pulled back the curtain. Then gently called, "Oh, Prince, please wake up. You told me to wake you up. 80's time for sword practice." Yuri was startled awake. He kept urging, Ina, quickly get me clothes first. No, I mean swimwear. But received gentle advice. Prince, please calm down. I will help you wash your face first. Please sit here. An image from the past appeared again, within his extremely tragic death, causing Yuri to remain silent for a moment, then made an extremely crazy request. Ina, slap me in the face, 3 times really hard. She panicked and refused immediately. Excuse me, are you telling me to plot treason? But Yuri tried to explain. If I tell you to do it is not treason. Yuri Brial. Always keep my promises. At this time, the sunlight outside had become more intense. Both quickly arrived at the training ground. Yuri was fighting while secretly remembering. I forgot that Ina has incredible strength. Seeing everyone's indifference made him feel a little disappointed. Not a single person offered to apply medicine for me. Even Bernard, the sword instructor, did not bother to ask anything about him. And he was simply sparring with him, not even correcting his stance. Since when did Bernard start teaching just by sparring? He also quickly reported to Yuri's father. He is a born genius in intellect. But unfortunately, if the prince were a little more sincere, then he could be a blessing for Brial. Yuri was listening to the conversation and nodding in agreement. That is right. Definitely from that moment. The moment when the two of them sparred together. After hearing that he was getting lazier and lazier, instead of trying harder, Yuri then declared loudly, Bernard, From today onwards, please teach me seriously. Yuri Bryle, will practice seriously from now on. He looked surprised. I do not know what suddenly influenced you, but... Understood, sir. He continued to focus on the sword, along with heartfelt words. From now on, we will begin the Rio training course. His seriousness made Yuri exclaim in panic. Wait. Bernard. After the two fought, Yuri secretly realized again. That is right. He continued to concentrate intently, with a sharp gaze. Even made Yuri secretly think that before Bernard came to Bryle, he was known as the Sword Demon. After dropping the sword, Yuri secretly acknowledged. So this is the training, under the Sword Demon Bernard. If I did not have mercenary experience, things would have been much worse. Although a little tired. But at this rate, my skills will improve quickly. Right. Not bad. He blocked all my attacks. Even he secretly marveled. How much has the prince improved since when? Then a very gentle voice appeared. Prince. Ina continued to announce. I think you should stop and go outside. His Majesty summons you. It seems that Count Johannes has brought his son. At this moment Yuri also secretly realized. Count Johannes' son is the one who betrayed the kingdom and paved the way for the empire in his previous life. Got Bachvar? Is that bastard? Then he quickly inquired. Ina. That bastard. Where is he now? At this time, lavish dishes had been prepared. Everyone started eating immediately afterwards. Yuri was enjoying his meal and heard the praise. The third prince looks very different now. He has even gained weight. Unexpectedly, his father replied, I think my son drank the wrong medicine or something. Only to receive a sincere statement from the person sitting at the same table. If there is such a thing, I also want my son to have a dose. Even though Yuri's father praised his son for being smart, he still objected. The boy still has a lot to learn. Yuri still remained very calm, which made the son even more frustrated. Then the silence that was enveloping the atmosphere was broken by Yuri's brother's loud call. Yuri. Did you do something to him? Then immediately received the answer. Actually, yes. He stabbed me in the back. Unexpectedly, he was challenged. What are you going to do? All-powerful Yuri Bryle. He was trying to remain silent on the outside, but secretly thinking. He puts on a fancy facade on the outside, but on the inside, he is busy trying to please others. He has not changed at all. The person Yuri was aiming at was silent for a long time, then revealed anger, which made Yuri even happier but still tried to remind himself, I won't do anything. I have to restrain my anger. All of this is because of you Got. This life can't meet the same path as the previous life. Thinking back, around this time, I fought with Got. Did he choose to betray because he harbored a grudge from that day? At that time, Yuri had deliberately negotiated. Okay Got, I heard you are good with a sword. I know a little about AT. We will. The kingdom does not need weak knights. Which made Got try to object. I am not an official knight yet. Yuri then snapped. Are not you about to become a knight serving this kingdom? Seeing Got answer hesitantly. What I mean is, yes. Which made Yuri even more excited and rushed into battle. Then duel. He was resisting and complaining. Sneak attack? What a despicable act. Both continued to fight for a few more rounds. Seeing himself at a disadvantage, Got continued to emphasize. Third prince. Please maintain the spirit of a knight. Then Yuri suddenly dropped his stick, which made him exclaim in surprise. Dropping the weapon, Yuri rushed in empty-handed. Then quickly kicked Got down, causing him to lie sprawled on the ground. Yuri continued to pick up his weapon and pointed it at the opponent. Got Bachvar? In his heart he secretly remembered. In your previous life, you used your father's glory to sell information to the empire. Your father is a great count and a respectable knight. What do you think those titles exist for? What are they used for? Seeing him answer hesitantly. That. Yuri secretly thought. I know you just want to survive. This time you will stand firm in Bryle. Then he asked. Are these questions too difficult for you? He gave the answer. Yes. I do not understand what you mean. Yuri continued to think. I will not allow any knight to have such thoughts. Including myself. Then he asked again. I will ask you again. Why is your father a count? And who gave him that title? Try to understand the nature of the situation from now on. Think about what I said here. after got turned and left. Yuri's brother praised endlessly. That is so inspiring. You are really good at fighting, causing him to ask in confusion. You thought I would lose. Making both brothers burst out laughing. Then Yuri curiously asked, Brother, what am I to you? He quickly received the answer. The biggest troublemaker and gambler ever to exist in this kingdom. Yuri hastily retorted upon hearing this. I am not like that anymore. You should stop causing trouble too. Causing his brother to pause for a moment. Did you fall and hit your head? At this time, it was late afternoon. After a tiring day of training, Yuri finally sighed in relief. Finished. He quickly received praise from the instructor. Well done. Let us stop here for today. Prince, I think you are ready to learn the mana method. This made Yuri even more curious. Ready. Will you teach me your method? He hastily replied. No, mine is not good enough for your potential. You should learn the Brile method. It is a great method. It is very effective and pure. This made Yuri secretly realize, in my past life, I learned the Brile method. I mastered it when I was a mercenary. But his thoughts were interrupted by Bernard's question. Are you thinking of learning a different method? Causing Yuri to quickly confirm. I am thinking. Then he blanked out for a moment. Then excitedly inquired. Bernard, introduce me to someone decent in the guard, based on potential, not current skill. He focused on pondering. Potential. If we only consider potential, then Gerald is the one, based entirely on potential. Yuri began to remember. Gerald. Before I regressed, I met him at the end of the war. His skills are decent. It's surprising he could survive that long with that level. His potential is indeed too strong. But he did not hone AT, and by the time the war started, both of us were mediocre. Then Yuri excitedly announced. Okay then. Let us go meet that lazy knight. He was determined in his head. I will enlighten him. The sun was setting. The knights were still diligently training. Rosso stood on the platform observing the knights. He noticed the person opening the door and entering. Prince, what brings you here? Yuri waved to Rosso. I came to see if everyone is doing well. Rosso reported the situation. They are still not as good as the prince, but we are doing our best. Yuri listened thoughtfully. Everyone seemed very enthusiastic. Yuri asked Rosso. Where's Gerald? He replied. You mean the new guy? He is UVA there. Yuri rested his chin in his hand, looking down at the target below. I understand Bernard's intention. Training should be motivated by the desire to improve skills, but he is only doing enough to get by. At this rate, he will be ruined. Yuri had an idea. He said to Rosso, Bring a wooden sword. I will also participate in sparring. Rosso heard this excitedly. I understand. Who will you fight? Yuri pointed to the blonde one below. That weasel UVD there. So the other knights were given a break. In the middle of the training ground there was only Yuri and Gerald. Upstairs, Rosso and the others teased Gerald. Rookie. Good luck. Stay alert. Gerald looked confused. Yuri then spoke. Sir Gerald, I heard you are very talented. Would you like to show me what kind of knight you are? Gerald was confused, and answered falteringly. Yes. Of course. Then, Yuri attacked first. I hope you won't disappoint me. Gerald was a bit stunned. He did not think things would turn out this way. Yuri attacked fiercely. Gerald did not give in either. One attack and one block. Yuri had to admit. Just as I thought. Gerald, you do not have any unnecessary movements. The aides above cheered for the main character. Prince, I am cheering for you. Gerald also recognized Yuri's ability during the battle. The prince is quite good, is not he? No, this is too strange. Yuri did not show any mercy. Attacking continuously. Until this point, Gerald could only block. His timing of attacks is almost abnormally stable. Yuri's face did not show any signs of tension. He seemed to be enjoying the fight. Gerald was confused. It is as if he is deliberately adjusting to my pace. Yuri noticed his expression. Not happy at all. Are you? This is no different from a play. Now then, let us fight properly. Yuri attacked more forcefully. Gerald quickly blocked the attack. He looked very shocked. Caught the exact center. Yuri was very satisfied. He blocked that attack. Just as I thought, his reflexes are extraordinary. Yuri continuously attacked the opponent. Gerald no longer relaxed. He was also paying more attention. I was gonna fight in moderation. Gerald made his first attack. Yuri quickly dodged it. The main character also had to grit his teeth to block. Damn A. 8 is not working. Even with the memories from his past life, Gerald is still a solid knight. I thought I could defeat him. But Gerald's eyes suddenly widened more than ever. Yuri took advantage of the opening. Raised the wooden sword high. He smiled slyly. At least I have to land one blow. Yuri accelerated, hitting Gerald's body. He shouted happily, "Got 80." The aides were also excited. Did that attack really hit him? Prince, you are great. Yuri turned to Gerald, arrogantly asking, "You are not going easy on me, are you?" He stammered, "I am not." Gerald was confused. 80 strange. I am the one attacking. But I do not know why I feel like I am being cornered. Gerald suddenly took a step forward, then suddenly attacked. But Yuri dodged 80, and even taunted. Too bad. Gerald was more bitter than eating chili. How uncomfortable. The aides were shocked to see Gerald attacking the prince. Gerald, is he crazy? Mana method. He is facing the third prince. Get a grip. Gerald seemed to have lost his mind, attacking frantically. But after hearing those screams, he seemed to wake up. On the opposite side, a few strands of hair fell to the ground after being slashed by the sword. A long wound appeared on Yuri's forehead. Blood also flowed down. Gerald's face turned green when he saw this. Prince. Rosso worriedly cursed him. You madman. Prince, are you okay? Yuri reassured those people. Ivan, is this the first time you have seen a sparring match? Rosso was still worried. But your wound. Yuri took a white cloth and tied the wound tightly. Then ordered, Gerald, pick up the sword again. Now it's getting interesting. There is no reason to stop. Yuri continued to attack Gerald. So this prince is different from me. Reaching the limit. No, he is pushing himself beyond his limit. Gerald took a step back because of the main character's attack. Yuri was more excited than ever. He kept attacking. Looking at Yuri, Gerald was shocked. This prince is different from me. Reaching the limit. No, he is pushing himself. Gerald could not attack. He could only block and block. Yuri exceeded his limit. Even though this was just a sparring match, its momentum was overwhelming. Gerald was tense, feeling like the blood in his body was boiling. I have never felt this way before, even when sparring with stronger opponents. Gerald grabbed his sword and lunged towards Yuri. The main character did not neglect Itai either, raising his sword to block the attack. Gerald felt confused. But this Dooning Prince is causing something inside me to awaken. Yuri suddenly accelerated. He ran straight towards the opponent. Strongly slashing past, Gerald leaned back to dodge the dangerous attack. There is no doubt anymore. He had to try harder. Gerald gripped the wooden sword tightly. Combining AT with mana, he slashed down. When the two swords touched, Yuri's wooden sword immediately had cracks, then was slashed into two halves. Yuri had lost his weapon before the opponent's powerful attack. He suddenly sighed with relief, then smiled brightly. ATZV. Gerald was panting. Fighting a child takes so much energy. Yuri reached his hand to him. I just realized something, Gerald. Gerald quickly shook his hand and replied, No. Well done. He secretly assessed. That is the fierce will and perseverance that I have never experienced before. How can such a doomed prince be able to? Seeing Gerald staring at him, Yuri wondered. What are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you holding my hand? You made the prince bleed on his head, and now you are just standing there. Doing nothing. Gerald panicked upon hearing this. I'm sorry. Then he ran to get bandages. Watching that figure, Yuri sighed softly. AT was just a slip. The main character lay sprawled on the training floor. At this time, cheers kept coming. Oh, Prince, you are amazing. The guards standing above were cheering and praising Yuri. Rosso noticed the person behind him approaching. AT turned out to be Saint, the captain of the Brile Guard. Rosso wondered. Captain, when did you arrive? He replied, I just arrived a while ago. Yuri was still lying on the floor and showed no signs of getting up. He closed his eyes as if enjoying this moment. Saint saw this and thought about a few things. A few days later, At the palace, Gerald drowsily walked along the hallway. Suddenly someone started a conversation with him. Your shift is UVA. Right. Yuri stood leaning against the corner of the wall, as if waiting to meet Gerald. He was surprised to see him. Third Prince. The main character smiled conspiratorially, then turned and walked away. Follow me. We have something to do today. Gerald quickly refused. I still need to practice. Yuri stopped and corrected Gerald. It seems your mind has cleared up. That is all thanks to me. So you owe me a favor. Gerald understood this, so he had to give in. Okay. Yuri secretly assessed the opponent. He is putting all his strength into his body. Still lacking. But well, this is enough for now. Gerald wondered. But where are we going? Yuri coldly replied. Just shut up and follow me. Gerald hesitated. If I tease something dangerous. He replied. He's okay. I will bring someone else along. Gerald was surprised. Who? Yuri then loudly called out to someone. Hey! In the distance, a white-haired person stopped upon hearing the call. Hernando, the royal magician of Bryle. He walked to the main character, shyly asking, What is wrong? Prince. Yuri casually opened his mouth. We have something to do. Help me. Hernando would naturally refuse. I would love to go with you, but I have a few urgent matters to resolve. Yuri then offered a very tempting condition. I will erase your debt. Hernando's eyes lit up upon hearing this. Really? Yeah. I will return all the money you lost to me last time. Have you ever seen me lie? Hernando closed his eyes to think. Besides the casino. Yuri had not even heard the answer and was excited. No. Right. Hernando then poured cold water on the main character's face. No. I mean, I have never seen you leave the casino. Yuri was speechless. Is that really how I am? But that is old news. Do not worry about AT. He then walked forward. Anyway, I will erase your debt, so do not say any more and follow me. Hernando put his hand into his pocket, looking for something. If that is the case, then I want to record a T in writing. He took a piece of paper full of words. Yuri was speechless at Hernando's action. Is the word of the third Prince of Bryle really only worth this much? Yuri pointed to the remaining person. Gerald, guarantee AT for me. I am saving you. You should vouch for Yuri Bryle's words. For my words too. Gerald had no choice but to accept. Hernando smiled brighter than flowers, opening his mouth. Then, let us go together. Prince. But where exactly will you go? With a knight from the guard and a magician. Yuri then gave the answer. To Sword Mountain. From now on, we will raid the dungeon of our ancestors. A moment later, the three of them together went zip into the dungeon of the royal palace. While observing the surroundings, Hernando exclaimed in surprise, I did not know that there was such a passage existing under the royal palace grounds. Right at that moment, Gerald asked in a somber tone, What is at the end of this cave? Home to? Hearing that question, Yuri indifferently answered, Aita leads to Sword Mountain. Gerald asked in surprise. Sword Mountain, the place where only legends about the founding ancestor remain. Yuri put on a dangerous look and nodded in response. That is right. Only a moment later, he immersed himself in his own train of thought. In my previous life after the Empire conquered Bryle, they discovered a hidden dungeon inside Sword Mountain. Yuri remembered himself reading the news in his previous life. The hidden relic found at Sword Mountain is revealed to be the legacy of the founding ancestor Bryle. He continued to sink into thought. Back then, they made a fuss saying that they had excavated the legacy of the founding ancestor Bryle in IT. However, this path to him was no different from a desperate escape route. Because of that, he could not even get his hands on Bryle's legacy. In the end, Ada fell into the hands of the Empire. But now, unlike the past when he only knew how to run away, in this life he is moving forward step by step, not to the past but towards the future. That is right, he will personally verify the legacy that our predecessors left behind. Different from the gloomy scene inside the dungeon, outside is a forest with a source of warm sunlight. Only a moment later, Yuri pushed open the door, preparing to continue deeper inside. After the door was pushed open completely, Yuri and the two guards continued their expedition. After walking for a while, Hernando surprisingly asked, So from now on we are at Sword Mountain? Not hearing a reply, he continued to question. But Prince, where did you get the key to that door? Aita looks like a creation. Even though he heard the question, Yuri only silently pondered. At was carefully hidden in the corner of the study just like in his previous life. Back then he did not know its use, so he had to pay the price. Not a very good memory. He answered with an extremely impatient attitude. You do not need to know. Right at that moment, a scream rang out. Ouch. At so sore. Hearing that, Yuri turned his head and reminded Hernando. Be careful. The leaves here are very sharp. Do not get hurt and just follow me. After reminding them, Yuri continued to lift the trees and go deeper inside. While watching him walk, Hernando turned to the other side and called, "Oh, Sir Gerald." "Yes." Knight Gerald softly answered. Hernando then hurriedly asked, "Did the prince eat something wrong?" Hearing that question, Gerald answered with an indifferent face. "Probably." Right at that moment, Yuri shouted angrily, "Are you two coming or not?" Hearing the prince's roar, Hernando laughed and exclaimed, "His temper is still the same." The atmosphere was becoming cheerful. Then Yuri suddenly stopped because he noticed danger approaching. He quickly reminded the other two, "Stop for a moment. At's a pack of fierce wolves." Yuri had just finished speaking. A pack of ferocious wolves had approached the three of them. The three quickly hid in the bushes. Yuri whispered in exclamation, "They are coming in packs. There may be even more." Gerald asked in surprise, "How do you know that?" Yuri then lied without blinking an eye and answered, "I read AT in a book." Hearing that answer, Hernando was even more panicked, his mouth agape in shock. "Book?" The prince. After the pack of wolves left, Yuri led the three of them to continue. "They have not discovered us yet. Let us quietly pass through." While the three were tiptoeing away, Hernando suddenly stepped on a dry branch, causing a very loud noise. Hearing the noise, both Yuri and Gerald turned around to look at the culprit at the same time. Seeing the gazes of the two were too scary, Hernando could only force a smile. Before he could finish his sentence, a ferocious wolf rushed. Seeing that scene, Gerald panicked and shouted, "Sir Hernando!" A streak of sword light flashed, tearing apart an entire sky. Before the wolf could do anything, At had to reincarnate into a new life. Hernando panicked and stepped back, looking at the wolf lying on the ground. Seeing that scene, Yuri only indifferently said, "You know the fur of fierce wolves is very rough and have used the appropriate manhwa method. Well done, Gerand. But their leader is keeping an eye on you." As soon as he had finished speaking, the pack leader appeared with a fierce look, wanting to devour them all. Only a moment later, At howled to call its comrades back. After the pack leader howled, a pack of ferocious wolves approached the three people. Seeing that scene, even though he was scared, Gerald still steadily said, "The two of you should not stray too far from me." In front are the wild wolves, baring their teeth and approaching. Two wolves then rushed up, intending to gang up on the knight Gerald. As soon as the two wolves rushed up, he immediately activated his mana. With just one streak of sword light, the heads of both wolves had to say goodbye to their necks. Seeing that scene, Hernando excitedly praised, "You fight well. No wonder you are the captain of the Bridal Guard." Yuri nodded in confirmation. "That is right, he has strength. But he still has a long way to go." While the two were discussing Gerald, there were already two aggressive wolves rushing towards him. Seeing that scene, he struggled to resist the ferocious pack of wolves. Even though Gerald had tried very hard, because there were too many enemies, it was very difficult for him to resist. Seeing that scene, Yuri softly called, "Oh, Hernando." Hearing the call, he respectfully answered, "Yes." Yuri then said, "AD seems AT's time for you to show the skills that my father has been very confident in." Hearing that, Hernando summoned a flame and said, "You know how to make use of a combat magician." Seeing that scene, Gerald asked in surprise, "Huh? What is happening?" While the wolf was biting his sword, in the distance a flame rushed whistling towards it. The wolf did not have time to dodge and took the unexpected attack head-on. Seeing the flame, Gerald quickly jumped away. As soon as he jumped, an explosion rang. The fire burned a part of the forest. Sometime later, as soon as it turned to the new day, Gerald surprisingly exclaimed, "I did not expect that there would be other monsters besides that pack of wolves. That is why we were delayed. But we finally arrived." After a difficult period of time, the three had reached the top of Sword Mountain. As soon as he arrived, Gerald asked full of doubt, "Prince, is this really that place? There is absolutely nothing here, let alone a legacy." Yuri did not care much, only observed around and answered, There can't be a mistake. I ties this place. But there should be something. While searching in vain, Yuri suddenly saw something. He then cheered happily. Found AT. From under the ground an object was flashing a light. As soon as he heard his voice, Gerald rushed UV. Prince. Yuri did not pay attention to the image and hurriedly dug the ground saying, "We have to take this thing out." Seeing that, Gerald quickly ran to help, not forgetting to say, "Sir Hernando, you also come help us." Hearing that, Hernando silently said, "But magicians should not get injured on their hands." A moment later, birds flew lightly in the sky, signaling a joy that was present. After a period of digging, a part of the sword's tail appeared. Yuri quickly reached his hand to grab the sword and lift it up. A moment later, he was holding the sword tightly in his hand with a look full of excitement. Seeing that scene, Hernando put his hand to his chin full of thought and exclaimed, "Ada does not look like AT has been buried at all. Ada looks just like a new sword." He did not know why, but Yuri put on a very surprised look. Yuri looked at the sword, very surprised, secretly exclaiming, "Sin." Suddenly, the knight Gerald appeared and asked, "So that thing is the legacy of the founding ancestor?" Yuri stroked the sword and answered, "I am not sure either." But only a moment later, the place everyone was standing suddenly shook violently. Ada seemed like AT was about to collapse. Seeing that scene, Yuri did not show any fear. Instead, he had an excited face and said, "We will probably know now." Only a moment later, the ground under their feet began to crack. The scene shook more violently than ever. Not long after that, the ground directly broke open. Gerald, very panicked, shouted, "Oh," in disarray. Contrary to his panic, Yuri and Hernando calmly accepted. After a scream, the three fell into a cave. Yuri was not injured because Gerald used his body to cushion him. As soon as he twitched his body, Ada caused Gerald to groan in pain. While bracing himself to sit up, Yuri exclaimed. He protected his body with the mana method. Truly admirable. Contrary to the other two, Hernando used magic to safely land on the ground, then said in admiration, "Well, this place is deeper than I thought." Seeing that scene, Yuri reached out to hold the sword and asked, "Did you just ignore the prince's safety and only care about yourself?" Hearing the prince's questioning, Hernando just smiled confidently and explained, "AT was really urgent at the time." Right at that moment, a click rang, attracting everyone's attention. Hearing the sound, Hernando hurriedly turned around to observe. But as soon as he turned around, he had to shout in horror, "Prince, UV there." Yuri annoyedly reminded, "AT's useless if you are going to deflect." Hernando was extremely panicked, hurriedly explaining, "No. Really. There is a ghost." Hearing those words, Yuri turned back in shock and shouted, "What?" The Death Knight coldly walked towards everyone. Seeing the one approaching, Yuri worriedly thought to himself, "A Death Knight." Not having time to think any further, he hurriedly called, "Gerald, get up." Hearing the call, Gerald also moved slightly but groaned in pain because he was still traumatized. Seeing that Gerald would not get up, Yuri lost his patience and quickly kicked his leg. Shouting, "I said get up." After being kicked awake, he quickly sat up in a panic and asked, "Where are we?" While Gerald was still panicking, he suddenly stopped because he saw the Death Knight. Seeing him approaching, he quickly drew his sword and said, "Prince, please step back. I will take care of this Death Knight." Seeing that scene, Yuri thought to himself, "Look at this guy. He is quick to react." While walking, the Death Knight suddenly stopped. Seeing that scene, Yuri frowned and thought to himself, "Death Knight." Looking at the Death Knight in front, he exclaimed in his heart, just like the name, a knight who has returned from the dead. If a knight dies and becomes a Death Knight, he will be even stronger than when he was alive. However, after thinking for a long time, Yuri leisurely stepped forward and said, "He's okay. That one is not dangerous." Gerald worriedly asked, "How are you so sure?" Seeing that, he just calmly replied with an indifferent tone, "I have a feeling." A moment later, Yuri had stepped forward and stood in front of the Death Knight and said, "There is no way the guardian of the Ancestor's dungeon would attack me." Yuri Bryle, one who carries the same bloodline. "Do not you think so?" The Death Knight was caught off guard by that question, so he did not have time to react. But only a moment later, the Death Knight did not say anything, just quickly drew his sword. Seeing that scene, Both Gerald and Hernando worriedly called, "Oh, Prince, be careful." Immediately afterwards, the Death Knight's sword flashed in front of Yuri. A light flashed. Thud. The sword slammed hard into the ground. Seeing that scene, Hernando panicked and put his hand to his mouth, exclaiming, "Oh no, the prince's head has been chopped in half." Hearing those unlucky words, Yuri angrily turned around and warned, "You better be careful with your words." Hernando still would not stop, just stammering, "The prince's head has been split in two." Suddenly, the Death Knight exclaimed, "That arrogant look is just like that guy." Hearing those words, Yuri asked in surprise, "Which guy?" "Eric Bryle." The Death Knight's answer made Hernando and Gerald panic. Gerald exclaimed in surprise. "Eric Bryle," as Hernando quickly added. "That is a name that everyone in Bryle knows. A great swordsman who conquered the continent with just one sword. And also the founder of the Bryle Kingdom of Knights. And the first king." Yuri did not care much about those words, just calmly asked, "Am I the first to set foot here?" The Death Knight nodded in confirmation. "Yes. If you are not a descendant of Bryle, you can't pull that sword," the Death Knight said while looking at the sword on Yuri. Yuri picked up the sword in surprise and exclaimed, "So this is the unparalleled sword that our ancestor used?" Right at that moment, the Death Knight spoke again. "I have used it." Seeing Yuri's disapproving look made the Death Knight ask in surprise, "Why are you making that face? Do you look down on it just because I have used it?" Yuri put on a disgusted look and replied, "I just feel bad for touching something that belongs to someone else." Suddenly, the Death Knight called, "Oh again, descendant of Bryle. Tell me the reason why you came here." He approached with a ferocious look and asked. Hearing that question, Yuri tightened his grip on the sword in his hand. He fiercely introduced, "I am Yuri Bryle, the third prince of the current Bryle dynasty, descendant of Erich Bryle, passed down his legacy to me." Hearing those fierce words from Yuri made the Death Knight pause in surprise. Only a moment later, the Death Knight turned his back on the three remaining people. But not long after, he suddenly spoke, "Because the time has come, it seems I have to start carrying on my mission. I will bestow upon you what you crave." Hearing that, Yuri put on a determined look. Only a moment later, Yuri lifted his foot and walked with the Death Knight. Gerald only dared to watch the prince leave with the Death Knight. In his heart, he was very surprised and thought to himself, "No way. We have set foot in the dungeon of Ancestor Bryle and talked to a Death Knight. This is not the royal guard life I imagined." Right at that moment, Yuri softly called, "Oh, Gerald." He turned his head back, looking very antagonistic, and asked, "What are you doing?" Hearing that question, Gerald suddenly stopped and blankly replied, "Huh." In a moment, he was very surprised. His eyes widened in surprise. Gerald secretly asked himself, "Prince." A bloody image suddenly flashed in his mind. "Hey, stop talking nonsense." Right at that moment, Yuri asked again, "Are not you coming?" Thanks to that call, Gerald suddenly regained his senses and thought, "No way. I am starting to see all sorts of illusions." After reminding himself, Gerald quickly ran to Yuri and said, "Coming." After that, the Death Knight approached the huge mana block in front. He went up a few steps, then sat on the stone slab. As soon as the Death Knight sat on that spot, a powerful source of magic slowly emitted. That source of mana made it difficult for all three to cover their eyes because of the strong light it emitted. Right at that moment, the Death Knight said, "I hope that..." Yuri had difficulty raising his hand to cover his eyes while listening to him. "You will be worthy." As soon as the Death Knight finished speaking, Yuri was transported to a different scene. Seeing the unfamiliar scene in front of him, Yuri surprisingly thought to himself, "Where am I?" Suddenly, a figure approached from the distance, causing Yuri to shout in shock, "Huh." He blankly asked in a low voice, "Are you my ancestor?" Right at that moment, a whirlwind arose, causing Yuri to blankly shout, "No wait. That is..." Not far from Yuri, that guy stood in a ready stance to attack him with a sword. Seeing that guy rushing in the wind, he confirmed, "That is not a human." As soon as that guy unleashed his attack, Yuri quickly used his sword to block A. While fighting, a source of power from Gape inside gradually emerged. Seeing that scene, Yuri surprisingly gaped and exclaimed, "This is..." The one in front of him was none other than the Mana method. The Mana method did not say a word, just raised its hand and pointed at the mana core on its body. Seeing that scene, Yuri just frowned slightly in annoyance. A moment later, a huge amount of Mai from inside the mana method slowly transferred into the sword, after the sword was enhanced. Seeing that scene, Yuri thought to himself, a method to use Mina, AT showing me its Bidech principles. After finishing, the mana method gently raised its hand to signal Yuri to follow AT. Seeing that scene, Yuri blankly asked, "You want me to copy AT? While we are fighting?" Yuri was extremely surprised, scratching his head and laughing. In his heart he secretly exclaimed, "My ancestor is really a crazy person. Training someone who has never learned the mana method by throwing them straight into live combat. This can only happen to someone who has lived to their second life." Yuri said, "Just like me," while obediently sitting down to use mana. Only a moment later, a source of mana appeared. He looked at his hand and asked, "Is Ada like this?" While the mana method was stunned, Yuri called aloudly, "Hey, I have not grasped AD all yet. But what serious strategy?" Hearing Yuri's arrogant words made the mana method even more interested. Looking at the one in front of him, Yuri secretly thought, "I have to get stronger, because before long, the Empire will reveal its ambition and invade Brial." After thinking, Yuri put the sword in front of him. He suddenly sank into thought. "I will do everything to destroy them. I will not repeat that mistake again." An image of a legion of the Empire appeared. "Erich Brial's swordsmanship," Yuri said, his hand gripping the sword even tighter. Suddenly, a light flashed. A figure rushed forward. Yuri strongly held his sword and fought with the mana method. Both started to charge into battle. Yuri excitedly said, "I will make it mine." Seeing his fighting spirit made the mana method even more excited and charged into battle. At the same time, at Gerald's place, his eyes were slowly opening. After some time, Gerald opened his eyes and looked at the scene in front of him. He had difficulty raising his hand to his forehead and blankly asked, "Huh?" After regaining his senses, Gerald secretly exclaimed, "This is not a dream." He stood up and looked around. Gerald put his hand on his head and exclaimed, "That was not a dream." A moment later, he carefully raised his hand to his sword and asked, "Where are you hiding? Come and fight me." Right at that moment, suddenly someone approached behind him. Hearing the sound, Gerald quickly turned around to look. Gerald fiercely held his sword and said, "Huh. A doppelganger. Is this the Death Knight's test?" Seeing the one who looked exactly like him, Gerald secretly thought. He held his sword tightly and asked, "What is your name?" "Also Gerald," the doppelganger said. "Gerald, do not resist your destiny." Hearing those words made Gerald very surprised and asked back, "What?" The doppelganger continued to provoke. "Did not you join the guard because you wanted a peaceful life?" He coldly ordered, "Stay away from the third prince. You will bring misfortune upon yourself if you dare to resist fate." Hearing those provocative words, Gerald just sighed helplessly. Gerald stared at the sword in his hand, secretly thinking, if AT was me from that day, I would also agree with him. But he suddenly remembered his conversation with Yuri a few days ago. "Are not you bored? All of this is like a play." Returning to reality, Gerald asked, "You would not understand because you are just a fake. Right? What you have done cannot be undone. Keep thinking about your last move." The doppelganger heard those words, his eyebrows almost touching each other. Seeing that look on his face, Gerald continued to say, "Just distracting your mind." Suddenly, the doppelganger said, "Wrong answer." After saying that, he jumped up preparing to rush to attack. His eyes became extremely ferocious. As soon as he attacked, Gerald quickly raised his sword to block that attack. As soon as he blocked that attack, he secretly exclaimed, "Too predictable of a move. A sword style that emphasizes defense, not daring to take any risks." The doppelganger could not withstand Gerald's attack, so he quickly tried to retreat to defend. Seeing the doppelganger jump away, he secretly exclaimed, "The me of the past was really boring." Suddenly, Gerald could not hold AT back and blurted, "Oh." His face became even more angry as he looked at the one in front. Die. As he spoke, he charged up to attack the doppelganger, because he did not expect AT. He did not have time to dodge. After attacking him, Gerald retreated to defend. Only a moment later, his body flowed to a slimy mud in horror. As soon as he saw that scene, Gerald was extremely surprised. Only a moment later, the doppelganger had completely become an indescribable pile of mess. He became extremely terrifying. The more so, the more excited Gerald became and said, "Of course there has to be a part 2. In just a flash, his eyes became ferocious and he secretly calculated. Its size is really overwhelming. The prince is probably fighting somewhere too. Suddenly, he sat down in a battle stance, secretly praying in his heart, "Please, exceed the prince." At the same time, at Yuri's place, the sun had begun to set. The scene of desolate mountains and swirling dust. Under the harsh gaze of the sun, the mountain was even more dangerous. After a fierce battle, Yuri had to lean against the mountainside, letting the mana method approach. Yuri still sat motionless. Right at that moment, the mana method picked up the sword again, preparing to attack him. Just when the mana method made a surprise attack, even though he was very tired, Yuri's hand still gripped the sword tightly. A moment later, he gently channeled his inner energy and used mana on the sword. In just a flash, Yuri regained his energy, continuing to fight with the mana method. Yuri powerfully charged up to launch a fatal blow, causing the opponent to not have time to dodge. The mana method was hit and was thrown far away. Immediately afterwards, a huge amount of me exploded. After the smoke cleared, AT was also when the mana method had time to dodge the danger. Seeing that scene, Yuri sighed. In his heart he secretly thought, "I do not know how long has passed. That was really a bit dangerous just now. The question is, how should I use this mana method?" Yuri remembered the scene just now, and sank into thought. He continued to think, "And how should I swing my sword? Thanks to constantly fighting. I think it's finally starting to stabilize a little." Yuri silently looked at the sword in his hand. Only a moment later, Yuri had to exclaim in surprise, "Huh." Right at that moment, the sound of the mana method's sword shattering suddenly rang out. In just a short time, the sword had broken into pieces. After the sword shattered, AT was also when the mana method vanished. Seeing that scene, Yuri secretly thought, AT starting to vanish. Before AT completely vanished, Ada raised its hand to wave goodbye to him. Seeing that scene, Yuri whispered, "So A must be time." "Thank you." Yuri smiled and said thank you to the mana method. After the battle with Zuvich, AT was also when the sky turned to night. Returning to the dungeon, at this time, Yuri annoyedly frowned and uttered a few sounds. Only a moment later, he woke up from the dream. As soon as he woke up, Yuri hurriedly looked around and asked himself, "Have I returned?" At the same time, Hernando asked Gerald, "Sir Gerald, are you alright?" Hearing that, he scratched his head and smiled stupidly. "Ah yes, I've fine." While the three were still bewildered, the Death Knight suddenly spoke. "Ada, seems you just had a beautiful dream." Hearing that, Yuri quickly asked, "What was that just now?" The Death Knight stood up slowly and explained, "That was Erich's test, something he left for the hair of Brial, the one who will one day set foot in this place." Hearing those words, Yuri sank into thought. In the previous life, Sword Mountain was brutally destroyed by the Empire, so no one from the Brial family could set foot in that place. Suddenly Yuri asked, "Did the Ancestor also use this mana method?" The Death Knight coldly replied, "No. Erich only obtained IT in his later years when traveling to the Eastern lands. That is his last legacy created from all the insights he accumulated. And you are the first heir." Seeing that, Yuri continued to ask, "Why is AT passed down to me this way instead of being given to the royal family?" The Death Knight continued his explanation. "This dungeon will not open if the time is not right. When AT opens, AT means that the moment to use that power has arrived." Yuri continued to ask, "What is the moment you are talking about?" The Death Knight shook his head and replied, "That is not something I can answer. Find out for yourself." Hearing those words made Yuri silently stare at the sword in his hand. Then suddenly, Yuri asked, "What is the name of this mana method?" The Death Knight coldly replied, "He called AT Soul Cleaver." Soul Cleaver. Yuri softly muttered the name of the mana method. Yuri was sinking into thought when suddenly the Death Knight called, "Oh, Yuri Brial, kneel on one knee. I will bestow the legacy of the predecessors to the hair of Brial." Hearing those words, Yuri quickly did as he was asked. After he knelt down, the Death Knight put his hand on his head and began the ritual. "Do not fear your enemies," the Death Knight softly reminded. Yuri closed his eyes tightly and replied, "Yes." The Death Knight continued to say, "Act according to your beliefs. Yuri replied again. Yes. The Death Knight's somber voice continued to resound. Until the very last minute. Fulfill the duty of a person who carries the Brial bloodline, Yuri firmly replied. Yes. Then suddenly, the Death Knight grabbed Yuri's hair, causing him to grit his teeth in pain. The death-like voice continued to resound. Engrave it in your heart. The Brial never abandon honor, even when dead. That is the oath of the Brial family. After saying that, the Death Knight vanished into the void, causing Yuri to pause for a few seconds. The next morning, at the royal palace, Inna pulled back the curtain and called, "Oh, Prince." At's morning. Yuri was annoyed by the sunlight shining into his eyes, and sighed warily. Seeing that, Inna hurriedly asked, "Are you tired? You came back very late yesterday. You look like you could fall asleep as soon as you put your head on the pillow." Hearing those words, Yuri just smiled and quickly said, Sorry. Yuri was still sleepy, yawning with tears in his eyes, and replied, "I stopped by the royal library for a bit last night." Inna asked in surprise, "Why would you suddenly go to the library?" Yuri replied slowly, "Because I needed to find a record." Yuri suddenly remembered the incident in the royal library. According to the records found in the library about the royal bloodline, there was once a description that the founder Erich Brial had a brother. A figure who had disappeared from the flow of history could not leave his name because he had abandoned his honor. After thinking carefully, Yuri secretly decided, he must be that Death Knight. And the original owner of that sword. He suddenly stared at the sword. Right at that moment, Inna reminded, "Prince, you must quickly change your clothes. His Majesty is looking for you." Yuri asked in surprise, "Why?" She shook her head and replied, "I do not know, but after meeting Sir Hernando, he requested your presence immediately." Hearing that name made Yuri annoyed and think, Hernando, that guy. He suddenly remembered the evening in the dungeon. While walking, Hernando suddenly called, "Oh, Prince." Yuri turned around in surprise and asked, "What is wrong?" Hernando said silently, "I will report what happened today to His Majesty." Hearing those words, Yuri asked annoyedly, "Do you really have to do that?" Hernando smiled mischievously and replied, "Yes, because I feel like I need to do so." Returning to the present, Yuri warily held his head and thought, "Ada seems like he has reported everything." A moment later, at a luxurious palace, Floor sat on the throne silently looking at Yuri, and he respectfully said, "Father, you called for me." He rubbed his forehead annoyedly and said, "Yes, I have heard from Hernando. Not only did you leave the royal palace on your own yesterday, but you also found the Ancestor's dungeon at Sword Mountain." Yuri did not avoid AT, calmly replying, "That is how AT is." Suddenly Floor asked, "Did you also find that sword in the dungeon?" Yuri respectfully replied, "Yes." He walked down and said, "Recently, I have heard that you have changed a lot." Floor stared at Yuri. He continued to say his thoughts, "From your maid, Bernard, Saint, even Hernando said so." Tell me what made you change?" Floor asked with a caring tone while stroking Yuri's head. Hearing that question made Yuri suddenly sweat continuously. His hand gripping the sword tightened even more. After a period of thinking, Yuri suddenly took a few steps back. Seeing that attitude of his, Floor asked, "You do not want to say?" Yuri hurriedly shook his head in denial. "That is not it." Hearing that answer, Floor asked again, "Then why did you step back with that look on your face?" Yuri hesitated and said, "It's because father is clenching your fist." Hearing that, his clenching hand slowly loosened and said, "Oh, is that so? Then just tell me." Floor continued to say, with no other choice. Yuri suddenly said, "I had a dream." "A dream?" Floor asked in surprise. He lowered his head and said softly, "Yes, and in that dream, I committed a serious sin." Floor asked in surprise, "You said a serious sin?" Suddenly, he called, "Oh, Yuri Brial. What is the sin you committed in that dream?" Floor suddenly asked with a very serious tone. Hearing that question made Yuri answer with a very hesitant attitude, "My sin is not being able to save Brial." Hearing that, Floor's face frowned even more. Yuri continued to say, "In my dream, Brial was caught in a great war and countless innocent people fell. I tried to save it, but I failed. The kingdom collapsed, so I ran away in disgrace and died a tragic death." Yuri put his hand on his chest and continued to say, "When I woke up from the dream, the necklace that my mother gave me had also disappeared." Yuri remembered his deceased mother and her keepsake and continued to say, I thought that maybe that dream was a warning from Mother. After speaking, Yuri looked straight into his father's eyes. Hearing those words, Floor calmly asked, So what destroyed the kingdom in that dream? Suddenly being asked a difficult question. Yuri hesitated. That is, but in his heart he was secretly calculating. 80's too early to mention the Empire. Moreover, there is a possibility that the invasion will not happen because I am changing the past. After considering carefully, Yuri answered, I am not sure either. 80 was a dark army that I had never known. Hearing those words, Floor just smiled slightly. He looked at Yuri and said very gently, I understand. Maybe 80 was just a fleeting nightmare, or maybe 80 was a warning from Lily. But what makes me relieved is that you know how to correct yourself. Yuri was surprised by his father's words. He secretly exclaimed in his heart, I really did that. I am just trying to struggle to be forgiven for my sins. Yuri imagined an image of himself in the past trying to run to find his light. Right at that moment, Floor said, There is one thing we need to clarify. Bring your sword here. He crossed his arms and ordered Yuri. Yuri suddenly remembered his father's past. He secretly exclaimed, Floor Brial, a genius who held a sword from the moment he knew how to walk, a king who carries every title with the word origin. He has carved his name on this continent with extraordinary swordsmanship. The 10 strongest is the title given to the strongest people on the continent, and he is considered the strongest among them. Simply put, the strongest swordsman on the continent, a person that no one can underestimate. After Yuri had taken the sword, he and his father prepared to practice. Yuri worriedly said, This is the first time I have entered father's training room. Hearing that, Floor said, I did not think any of my sons would have talent in swordsmanship. Yuri pouted and puffed his cheeks and replied, You thought I would be an exception. Seeing that look on his face, Floor just sighed and said, Talent. Then he raised his sword preparing to enter the battle. Floor suddenly asked Yuri a difficult question. What is talent to a swordsman? Strength, speed, reflexes, or outstanding intelligence. If you possess all of those, can you become the strongest knight? Floor coldly asked. But before Yuri could answer, he answered himself, No. Yuri was still not able to recover from his father's oppressive aura. Floor continued to lecture. What is more important than everything that is shown on the outside is what can make you surpass your human limits. His eyes were as sharp as a knife, then continued to say, something that surpasses even the feeling of duty or crisis. From within, Floor showed a source of imperial power. That source of pressure made Yuri stop. He frantically thought, Wait, the aura around father has changed. Yuri stared at his father in surprise. Only a moment later, Floor put away his sword and his pressure and said, I do not know what to call this either. It's like hearing the call of the sword. He hurriedly explained. Yuri still did not understand what was happening. His hand holding the sword suddenly dropped. Suddenly Yuri spoke doubtfully. Like destiny. Hearing those words, Floor just nodded and said, Perhaps, maybe it is. Yuri still stared at the sword. In his heart were jumbled thoughts. In the previous life, I should not have stepped on the path of swordsmanship. What about now? Yuri seemed to be lost. Seeing that thoughtful look on his face, Floor worriedly asked, What do you think, son? Not hearing an answer, he gently stepped forward. Suddenly, Floor asked questions. Should you take this sword? Do you hear the sword calling you? When death is near, will you still hold the sword tightly? Those questions surrounded him, causing Yuri to seem to sink into a zep darkness. After a period of thinking, Yuri shook his head with difficulty and said, I do not feel anything. He answered hesitantly. But as soon as Yuri looked up, Floor had shown a terrifying pressure. Looking like an antagonist, Yuri saw that scene and frantically called, Father. Suddenly from nowhere, countless eyes were staring at him, causing Yuri to panic. Seeing that scene, Yuri was so scared that he could no longer think about anything. Suddenly, many screams rang, Oh, do not run. Prince, leave here quickly. Mixed in with that were cries for help. Help. In just a flash, the scene changed again. In front of Yuri was a large fire, and a worried voice calling, Prince Yuri. Yuri was shocked to see the burning city in front of him. Immediately afterwards was an image of people being trampled under the ground. Innocent people were being mercilessly slaughtered. Yuri as an adult wearing armor, with a somber face looking at everything. Suddenly, he woke up and shouted in panic, "What?" Yuri worriedly looked around and blankly asked, "Why is Bryle in a sea of fire like this?" While he still did not understand what was going on, a few people shouted, "The third prince is Zuva there. The last prince of Bryle is here." Immediately after that voice, thousands of soldiers of the Empire approached Yuri. Seeing that scene, Yuri shouted in shock, "The Imperial Army." Seeing those scenes, Yuri was extremely panicked. In his heart he thought, "Wait. This is..." He stared at his large hand, then made a guess. Could it be that I have returned again, back to the time when Bryle collapsed? Yuri silently looked at the Imperial Legion. The castle was engulfed in the smoke and flames of war. Yuri Bryle stared blankly at the collapsing royal estate. He could not believe this was Rio, and had to exclaim, "What is this?" Suddenly, an enemy from behind unexpectedly attacked, rushing to attack Yuri Bryle unexpectedly. "Die, Prince of Bryle." Fortunately, Yuri Bryle reacted in time, preventing the attack of that enemy. The two sides crossed swords, fighting fiercely, neither side giving in. It seemed Yuri Bryle was having difficulty. He gritted his teeth, trying his best to block the enemy's sword. Then he used all his strength to push the soldier down, finally dealing with this guy. The Bryle royal army also worked together wholeheartedly. The soldiers advised Yuri Bryle that, "Prince, we will block them. In the meantime, please run away. Prince, please run away." The entire royal army was fighting bravely, loyally and courageously. Some soldiers had to leave. Before that scene, Yuri could not bear to flee. At his feet was now the tattered flag of the royal family. Yuri Bryle blankly exclaimed, "Is it all just a dream? Is Bryle finally destined to fall in despair?" The prince was so desperate that he could not hold the sword firmly and charge forward anymore. Many thoughts kept swirling in his head. "I can't stop it." Yuri just stood motionless even though the enemy had rushed up very close to him. But then he decided not to give up. He held the sword firmly, looking towards the enemy. His heart was full of determination. Not willing to give up, Yuri Bryle told himself, "I swore that I would never be afraid of the enemy." Suddenly, a voice from somewhere reminded Yuri, "Act according to what you believe in. Until the very last minute. Fulfill the duty of a person who carries the Bryle name." Yuri now had his spirits lifted. He swung his sword high, attacking straight forward, as if he had nothing to lose. He slashed each enemy one by one as fast as lightning. One by one fell under Yuri's sword. Blood splattered everywhere, staining this place red. Unexpectedly, at this time an enemy's trident flew Uvik. Yuri tried to block it. Then he swung his sword up. One slash through the enemy's neck. Yuri Bryle's sword and armor were now stained with the enemy's blood. But he was just a lone person. It was difficult to fight against all of them. Yuri Bryle warily panted. The enemy army shouted arrogantly, "Prince of Bryle, now you are definitely dead. So give up." Yuri Bryle painfully. 2 lines of helpless tears burst out. He gritted his teeth and said to himself, "The Bryle, do not abandon honor even in death." Then Yuri Bryle transferred all his strength into the sword. To the very end, he would not give up, determined to rush up and fight the enemy to the end. Prince Yuri held his sword and jumped high. He declared to all of them that he would fulfill the duty of a person who carries the Bryle name. Scene changes. Yuri Bryle was returned to the royal castle. At this time he was still mumbling, to the very end. Suddenly a hand was placed on Yuri's shoulder, and gently said, "Yuri, can you hear my voice?" That voice seemed to awaken Yuri. He exclaimed in panic, "Father." Yuri stammered and told his father. The Legion. The Dark Legion. Yuri was so shocked that he could not speak, because the scene of the smoke and flames of war was now gone. Father reassured Yuri. "Calm down. What you saw was just an illusion." At this time Yuri was still distraught. Frightened. He tremblingly held the sword. "So it's just an illusion created by this sword." Flor Bryle silently looked at his son for a long time. Then he sighed and said, "It seems I was wrong." He gently told his son, "Yuri, maybe this sword will be kept by you." Hearing this from his father, Yuri could not help but be surprised. Then he smiled. With a radiant face, he looked up at his father, confidently telling his father that, "Yes, that is my decision." Flor Brial just silently looked at Yuri for a long time without saying anything more. Yuri was a little bewildered and confused. Why is he suddenly making that face? Anyone who sees this scene might think I am about to turn into a corpse. He slowly raised his hand intending to take his father's hand. Then Yuri smiled happily and told his father, "Father, do not worry." Flor Brial was startled by the cheerfulness of this son who seemed to have no danger. Yuri put on airs, confidently saying, "You know, I am a genius." Finally, Flor Brial relaxed his face and smiled at Yuri. Seeing his father's appearance at this time, Yuri was suddenly confused, not understanding much. Scene changes to the next morning. The castle was still flooded with sunlight like every day. Today the sky was clear. The golden sun shone brightly everywhere. In the training area, Bernard looked at the expression and face of Prince Yuri today and found it strange. He saw that Yuri had a huge lump on his head and asked, "Prince, whose masterpiece is today?" Yuri said shyly, "At's father's." Bernard smiled and said, "It seems His Majesty used some strength today. But I won't reduce the difficulty of your training just because of that." Yuri grimaced and scratched his head, saying, "I know." Then he thought to himself, "Now that I think about it, Bernard is the one who stayed in Brial because of father." Yuri was still quite curious, so he asked Bernard, "You stayed in Brial on the condition of a one-on-one fight with father, right?" He replied, "Yes, that is right." Then Yuri suddenly asked, "Then if I tell you to stay, will you still stay, even if you can't have a one-on-one fight with father?" Bernard was a little paused before this sentence of Yuri, thinking for a moment, and he laughed loudly, bluntly saying, "No." Hearing that, Yuri was not too surprised. He swallowed his anger. Damn, still a heartless guy as always. But in fact, Bernard was probably thinking something else in his heart. He smiled and asked Yuri back, "It seems the prince wants me to stay. I will stay if you show me something that convinces me. For example, the swordsmanship of the Ancestor." Eric Brial. Yuri was bewildered by Bernard's proposal. He exclaimed, "You want me to teach you the swordsmanship of the Ancestor?" Bernard smiled happily. He said, "I have started to be interested in Atai." He scratched his head in confusion, hesitating before that proposal of his, skillfully saying, "I'm sorry, but that will be very difficult. At's easy to understand after all, because Atai's called the Sword Demon." He respected Yuri's opinion, gently saying, "At's okay even if you have not completely mastered it. That is what I had considered from the beginning." Prince Yuri drew his sword. He said, "You are right, but what I want to say is that thing won't help you at all." He continued, "This swordsmanship is originally won with the mana method." After seeing the power on the sword, Bernard wondered, "The two are one. This is the first time I have heard of that. Normally the mana method is used to enhance swordsmanship." Prince Yuri closed his eyes. He felt the power emanating from that sword. He smiled and confidently said, "That is right. That is why I said AT will be difficult to pass AT on to you, and AT will never be complete anyway." He stroked his chin, his eyes thoughtful. He sighed and said, "All right." Yuri froze for a few seconds. He opened his mouth in surprise. Really? Bernard had understood everything. He honestly said, "The swordsmanship is okay even if Itai's not complete. In exchange I will stay in Brial." He gave a sincere smile, responding to the prince's sincerity. "Even if Itai's just half, there will definitely be parts I can understand." Yuri showed helplessness, clicking his tongue in his head, truly crazy confidence. He smiled. The prince accepted his opinion. "All right, so you will stay in Brial as promised." "Okay." He replied, "Yes, sir." He ran away a short distance and said, "Then." Brial turned his face back, drew the sword and issued a challenge to the prince. "Can you perform AT?" He confidently stood ready, saying loudly, "All right, I will show you." Yuri Brial's soul cleaver. Bernard interrupted him. "There is one thing I have not told you." He continued, "Actually, I had intended to stay in Brial from the start." After hearing what he said, Yuri was surprised, standing still for a moment, while Bernard laughed gleefully. His Majesty said to be together for 10 more years. The prince felt uncomfortable in his heart. He lost his temper, shouting at his face, What? So you are saying conversely Bernard raised his sword in front of him? He asked. You won't attack? Without hesitation, he said to Yuri. Then I will strike first. Yuri's face showed his discomfort. He tried to suppress this anger, gritting his teeth and saying, Why are you? He angrily stabbed the tip of the sword into the ground. Prince Yuri could not hold back this anger anymore. He attacked back at Bernard, and gritted his teeth and said, You finally said AT now. Scene changes to the evening after the training session. Yuri was lying on the bed and kept thinking. He suddenly saw AT. AT's changing into a different future, a Brile that was not destroyed because of my mistakes. Even though no special measures were taken, Bernard's decision to stay in Brile was proof of that. Changing the future used to be vague and uncertain, but even if I tease just a little bit, AT's definitely changing. But suddenly Yuri blankly realized, AT's not UVP yet, this time I have to stop the Empire. He was determined to do AT at all costs. He must be able to do AT. Suddenly the maid Ina unexpectedly entered Yuri's room. She blankly said, Prince. Definitely. You can't cause trouble this time. Yuri immediately sat up and asked, Is there something else on the schedule? Ina replied, You are always causing trouble, so you do not even know what I am talking about. Right? Tomorrow. You have to attend a meeting. That is why I said that. Yuri panicked. A meeting. Ina sighed and said, Yes. A meeting of the elders. His Majesty said this time. You will also participate. You still have not heard. Yuri's face showed surprise, as if hearing AT for the first time. Ina added, You have to leave right tomorrow morning. I heard most of the Council of Elders will be attending. Hearing that, Yuri scratched his head and said, Damn A. Suddenly Ina tightly grabbed Yuri's hand. Her eyes were bright and clear, instructing the prince. There will be some scary and stubborn people. But you absolutely can't cause trouble or do anything like that. Yuri then smiled and told Ina confidently, Is that what you are worried about? Do not worry. I do not do that anymore. Ina was very surprised by the prince's momentum. Really? Promise me. Yuri was also happy, smiling and replying, I told you. You do not have to worry. Scene changes to the next morning. The meeting with the Council of Elders was about to take place. Suddenly one of them slammed his hand hard on the table. Yuri was startled by that. He was a little wary and thought, Ina was right. Oppose IT from the start. Duke Gennard naturally angrily said loudly, AT's wrong for the prince to learn an unverified mana method. Looking at the harsh faces of the elders, Yuri became even more careful. He calculated bit by bit. Duke Gennard and the members of the Council of Elders. This is actually a place to discuss the operation of the kingdom. But now, AT has long become a place for them to aim for the throne. Now I understand why my father did not participate in AT before. Duke Gennard continued to provoke. Looking down on Prince Yuri. You should learn the Brile method. AT's better than spending time learning such things. Another blue-haired elder disagreed. Angrily saying, What do you mean? Unverified method. This is the legacy of our ancestors. Gennard asked back, How are you sure that is the legacy of our ancestors? The blue-haired elder shouted. Are you doubting the prince? Duke Gennard Jetheri put his hands together, talking to Yuri sarcastically. What I mean is, AT's better to be careful. Are not we gathered here because we are worried about the prince's future? Prince Yuri was not scared at all anymore. He crossed his arms and confidently replied to Duke Gennard. You even organized a meeting of the Council of Elders just to discuss my mana method. I am very touched. In fact, Yuri was trying to restrain his anger. He thought, How shameless. A traitor who bowed down to the emperor as soon as Brile collapsed. He is still good at talking as always. Duke Gennard did not stop. He continued to poke fun at me. Saint, the captain of the Brile Guard. He asked Saint, What do you think? Saint was confused for a moment. Then stammered, I do not have the right to arbitrarily give a judgment. The reason is, each mana method has its own advantages and disadvantages, and each person also has different characteristics. Duke Gennard made a fuss, standing up abruptly and telling everyone, Look, even the captain of the Brile Guard says he is not sure about this mana method. Nothing makes people more uneasy than that. I think it is best to give up such a mana method. The blue-haired elder thought differently. He retorted immediately. What meat? Saint is saying does not mean he is not sure. He wants to say that each magic method has its own value. A gold-haired elder felt dissatisfied. He stood up, slammed his hand on the table and bluntly shouted, "AT still the same anyway. The Duke is worried that that magic method might harm the prince." The other emperor was also confused. Putting his hands together, he thought thoughtfully. Yuri crossed his arms seriously, looking straight at the emperor's face, then said in his head, "Look at these people." He glanced at them, thinking in his head, "This is bad." The council was coming to a final decision. Many emperors had given their opinions, and they said in unison, "I also think so. I agree." The situation had completely reversed. If they have not learned the method for long, then they can completely change the operation of the core. But, because of the combat experience in the illusion of the Ancestor, Soul Cleaver has taken root to seep in my heart. I can't even explain all these things. What should I do? Suddenly an elder sitting at the end of the table chuckled. He said, "You really know how to persuade people." Yuri was very surprised to see that. Everyone turned to look at him. He was the Freedom Prince Calcio Ranch. He raised his hand and asked everyone, "Sorry, I want to say something. Among the people here, how many have actually faced an orc?" At this time Saint was whispering with the white-haired man. Suddenly someone stood up, causing them to pay attention. Duke Yugis frowned when he saw this and asked, "Who are you? What is your title?" He propped himself up to stand. He solemnly placed his hand on his chest, bowed and introduced, "My name is Calcio Rancha. I am a Fikari Baron." Duke Yugis openly looked down on him and said, "A Baron? A lowly person like you dares to attend the Council of Elders meeting?" Calcio retorted, "I did not want to come either." Calcio leisurely sat down and said, "But what can I do?" He glanced with sharp eyes and continued, "Baron Sator has entrusted this task to me." Yuri crossed his arms in surprise when he heard the name. Baron Sator. Yuri began to speculate. He is definitely the Marquis guarding the border of Brial. True to that title, he is the Lord guarding the border. That is, the front line, and is known as a true warrior who has spent his entire life on the battlefield. He sat glancing at Calcio and thought, he is known as someone who does not care at all about the affairs of the nobility, so what made him send someone to attend the Council of Elders? The blue-haired man spoke in doubt. What happened that made Baron Sator send you to attend the meeting? Calcio spoke in response. He is not the type of person to explain in detail. However, he smiled insincerely and said, "Seeing the high-ranking nobles here only preoccupied with power struggles immersed in meaningless debates, I think I understand why the Marquis sent me here." Calcio propped himself up and presented. The type of Mina method does not actually make much of a difference on the battlefield. Whether A ties the Brial method or the Empire's Lionheart technique, in the end, it all depends on the person who casts it. Hearing that made the white-haired man avoid his gaze. Calcio turned to say, "Prince." Yuri calmly replied, "As the Prince of Brial, I do not understand why I have to avoid arguing about me cultivating the me method of our ancestors. No matter what everyone says, I will still learn the Mina method of our ancestors." Those present all looked confused. Calcio spoke. "Now the prince's instinct with the sword has decided to follow the will of the ancestors and that Mana method," he said loudly. "So why do those who have no relation, no authority, and no responsibility keep interjecting and speaking loudly?" Calcio abruptly changed his attitude, his face radiant but his words full of sarcasm. "Usually those who sit at desks, who have never even wielded a sword in their lives, are the loudest like this," causing Yuri to hold back his laughter. Duke Yugis said uncomfortably, "Fikri Baron, you are talking nonsense." Calcio skillfully replied, "Please forgive me if there is anything impolite. I could not help it, because I have to fight the orcs outside the border every day." He questioned, "I also mentioned AT before, but can you tell me, among the people here, how many have actually fought orcs?" Causing the hall to become silent with no one speaking in rebuttal. Calcio explained, "Do you think those orcs care what type of mana the opponent uses?" Causing everyone to be speechless. Then a red-haired man sighed and said, "You are right, but even so the prince is still doomed. So the judgment of..." Before he could finish his sentence, Yuri bluntly replied, "You mean I should tear up and revise the entire Mana method just because I made a wrong decision? If necessary then." Yuri frowned seriously and said, "You said that while knowing that a tie is impossible, right?" Calcio spoke. "Anyway, AT does not seem like the prince will be willing to back down. Or are you planning to forcibly extract his mana core or something?" The red-haired man jumped up and said, You are, but he was cut off by him and said, I do not think you would do that. Calcio looked at Yuri and said, the prince also agrees. Right. Yuri looked at him with satisfaction. He said again, but everyone is just sitting here, harming the prince's mental health. At this time Duke Yuges gritted his teeth angrily and listened. It seems the royal palace is truly a leisurely place. He slammed his hand hard on the table and defended. Leisurely? What did you say? How rude. If you say that, then is not the Marquis also very quiet lately after receiving that budget? After hearing this, Calcio said with a stern and angry voice, does there have to be hundreds of deaths to be called uneasy? Surely you have never seen or heard the reports about soldiers falling every day. Calcio said seriously, on the day I left the Marquis' territory 4 people passed away. He confessed, I even personally covered the shroud for a friend, someone who I had breakfast with and talked to until dawn. Everyone listened to Calcio speaking. Those orcs never have to rest. Noble. They spend their entire lives fighting and slaughtering. They listened and were all cautiously thoughtful. Yuri seriously thought. The orcs. He speculated. Now that I think about it, around this time, there used to be a problem between Brial and the Klein Duchy. A scene of destruction appeared. He thought. At that time the orcs constantly crossed the border causing serious losses. Has there been any change in the actions of the orcs? The room was unusually quiet. Yuri spoke. That is right. They have become more suspicious and gloomy than usual. He realized and asked. I understand. What about the situation on the Klein side? Causing Calcio to be surprised. Yes. Yuri asked seriously. Is not the army of the Klein Duchy also stationed there? Calcio replied in confusion. That is, their border defense forces suddenly withdrew. Yuri continued to ask, what about the border village on that side? Calcio replied, 80 has been completely destroyed. The people have been killed, taken as slaves. The situation is extremely tragic. Yuri heard this and frowned thoughtfully. The time AT happened matches perfectly. Is AT a civil war? He rubbed his head and blurted, oh. The Duke's third son is behind all of this. Everyone who heard this was stunned and wondered. Yuri realized he had misspoke. He stood up and said, I think that is enough for today. Duke Yuges said in confusion. Enough? Prince. He left with a smile. Let us discuss bigger issues than my trivial mana method. He suggested, such as defending against the Klein Duchy and the orcs for example, causing Duke Yuges' face to darken. He said sarcastically, do not worry about the affairs of a boy who is in puberty. To a place that was late in the afternoon with simple rows of houses. The mysterious man in the magic orb said, so that is a tea. So the prince said that. Calcio replied, yes. Calcio stroked his chin and presented. Rumors are spreading that he is completely different from the person he was before. The man probed and asked, what do you think of him? Calcio remembered Yuri's serious appearance when he spoke. He smiled slightly with interest. Then boldly remarked, his eyes are not bad. The mysterious man said with interest, we will have to keep an eye on him. He ordered, Calcio, investigate the prince's mind. Calcio asked, but on the surface he has nothing remarkable. He replied, if necessary just do it. Calcio replied, then I will proceed immediately. He said, I will contact you later. Then the orb disconnected the other end of the line. Calcio stood observing outside the window and said, it is so peaceful. Even though every day, soldiers at the border are still falling. Suddenly he recognized someone exclaiming. That is. Looking at the boy who was wrapped up like Yuri. He wondered. The third prince. Calcio clung to the window, looking down in confusion, then said again, of course not. Suddenly Hernando Randu Vevan said, I secretly left the royal palace at your request. But my heart is pounding. When I was little I used to run away from home like AT was eating meals. Yuri replied, you mean running away from your mother was like eating meals? Hernando replied, roughly. I used to be a rebellious teenager. Hernando said in a low voice, that girl is staring at us. Do you think she has recognized my identity? Yuri openly said, why do you seem so excited? You can leave the royal palace at any time. Hernando retorted and said, if it's just me alone it's called strolling. But going with you feels like plotting rebellion. So what are you planning to do now? Some mischief or something, causing Yuri to turn around and say, that won't happen. Even if I wanted to, I would not do it with you here, he said weakly. I'm sorry. That is very disappointing. Hernando went straight to the main topic and said, But Prince, where are we going now? Yuri confidently replied, The casino. We will go to the most illegal casino in the capital. Hernando was stunned and wondered. Wait, but you just said we would not do anything bad. Yuri replied, Well, that is right. Then just lead me there. Hernando smiled and said, Whenever I am too drunk to go home, I come there. But suddenly he called his name. Hernando. Yuri stopped and said, Let me say this. All of this is for Brial. Hernando said in surprise, Do not tell me that. But in his head he thought, How much has he prepared after all? Then he said, Very good. Prince. Hernando skipped excitedly, while Yuri continued with momentum. He said, Tonight let us turn that casino upside down. Yuri recalled the past. In his previous life, among the people of Brial, there were some who made the whole world talk about them. An image of a mysterious and powerful man in a painting. This is the boss who once ruled the underworld and the notorious Lone Shark. In the frame was a noble and elegant woman. Yuri identified, they are giants in the Baidinet world, at the top of the entire continent. And the remaining person is, she looks cruel, the one who beheaded the bosses in the underworld, and spread fear throughout the streets of Brial. In the past, she was a unique assassin, a scene where she was obeyed by many subordinates. He looked attentively at someone and thought, and the one who was killed by her is... A group of people were approaching Yuri and Hernando. He recognized, this guy is the best lone shark today. His name is Goryo. At this time he put his hand on his chest, introduced himself and skillfully opened his mouth. I did not expect a nobleman like you to have bide a nut with us. What an honor. Yuri stood with his arms crossed and said loudly, It seems you already know who I am, causing Hernando to jump in shock and say, What? Goryo smiled and replied, Of course, the king's magician and the third prince personally want to meet us. Even if the power is limited, would not there still need to be someone to take responsibility? Yuri said seriously. What an accurate assessment. I am not here just to gamble or have fun. Goryo's face showed interest. Goryo happily extended his hand to invite. Then let us sit down and talk. A scene of everyone sitting around a table playing cards. He called, Prince. Coming to his seat, Hernando anxiously whispered in his ear, Prince, do not tell me you are not going to gamble. You never mentioned anything about this to me either. Yuri showed a low voice. Be quiet. The three sat opposite each other. Goryo spoke. I heard you did not come here to play at the casino. So could it be that you came here to borrow money? Yuri answered straightforwardly. That is right. I intend to use the borrowed money as an investment. Goryo replied. So you are planning to set up your own slush fund? He recognized the intention and speculated. And because you are borrowing money from me, not from the bank, could it be that the third prince has greater ambitions? Yuri interrupted. Stop. His mouth smiled slightly. It is not your job to interrogate me. He shrugged indifferently and said, Forgive me for that. I want to send my apologies. Yuri crossed his arms and complied. He's okay. After all, I am the one who needs money. Goryo spoke. Then can you go straight to the issue and clarify what that money will be used for? Yuri seriously said his intention. I will use the borrowed money to buy back Mugranja, the spice land of Klain, because sooner or later the supply will not be enough to meet the demand. Hernando was shocked to hear that and said, Prince, are you planning to? While Goryo stroked his chin with interest. He stroked his mustache and speculated. Mugranja is indeed an essential area for processing high-end spices, but I still doubt whether it is worth investing such a huge amount of money into it. Yuri replied, That will happen soon. Hernando put his hand to his chin and thought, I also heard that war has broken out in the Klain Duchy and the orcs are wandering everywhere. But I think the price of spices can rise to that extent. He guessed in confusion. Could it be that he simply wants to monopolize the regional specialty one step ahead? He looked at Yuri and realized. That look. Goryo at this time also had a change of thought about him. Yuri Brial. You are very different from the rumors that are spreading. Moreover, it seems you are acting based on more information than what has been revealed. Suddenly he spoke confidently, breaking his train of thought. Now then, let us decide on the amount of money. As an investor, not a prince, how much can you give me? The lights on the ceiling were still shining. A strangely quiet scene. Goryo put his hand on the table. His face seeming resolute said, "Please sign this debt contract." His eyes were firm as if he had achieved his goal. In his hand at this time was holding the debt contract. He put AT away. Hernando followed and wondered, "Did Goryo really give you the money?" Hernando continued, "But this is too much, Prince." He did not seem to pay attention to what he was saying with a blank face. Hernando frowned and said dejectedly, "You should have at least told me in advance. From the beginning you did not intend to gamble." "Did you?" Yuri replied as if slapping his face. If I told the truth, would not you have dragged me straight to my father?" The two continued to walk. Hernando asked, "Are we going to the transaction place now?" Yuri replied, "Yeah. I have something I want them to do." He secretly calculated. In fact, Magranjo is a place that can guarantee profits. The only alchemist who knows the formula. The assistant of the Duke of Klein will be the first to leave in the upcoming war. He thoughtfully said, "This is an item that can be shouted at any price, at least until a replacement appears." To a place with a hanging sign. The two stood in front of a dilapidated house. He thought, "I can't entrust this matter to anyone else." Yuri casually said, "We are here," causing Hernando to say in shock, "What?" He pointed and shouted, "Wait, a place that is about to collapse." Yuri grabbed his hand and knocked on the door. He knocked hard on the door and called loudly, "Elaine Wood, are you there?" Hernando awkwardly stopped him. "Prince, wait. I can entrust this to a large trade association." Suddenly someone came and said, "Who is AT?" She introduced herself in confusion. "I am Elaine Wood." He extended his hand and introduced, "Elaine Wood, I am Yuri, the Prince of Bryle," causing Hernando standing next to him to be helpless. Elaine was hesitant when she heard him speak. Yuri said straightforwardly, "I have something I want you to do." Hernando worriedly asked, "Prince, are you crazy?" Yuri said annoyed, "There is nothing a prince can't say." The two walked. Hernando teased and reminded, "Anyone who sees you in this state will say the same thing as me. You are entrusting the purchase of Magranja to a trade association that is on the verge of collapse." He thought, currently she may be a struggling merchant. He confidently guessed, but before long, the name Elaine will be famous throughout the continent, as the leader of a trade association that no one has ever heard of. Yuri oppositely compared, and unlike Goryo, who hides in the shell of trust, but is willing to use dirty tricks when cornered, Elaine sees the customer's promise as sacred. He smiled slyly and rejoiced secretly. In the previous life, she could only be a legendary merchant. But in this life, I will turn her into a legend above even legends. His expression made Hernando gape. Hernando sighed and asked, "Anyway, are you done?" Yuri pointed and said, "Not yet. There is still one last thing." Hernando was extremely tired after hearing that. He turned into a dark alley. He shouted loudly, "Wait, Prince." Yuri still walked in, ignoring Hernando's lamenting. "Where are you planning to go now?" Images of Goryo and Elaine appeared. He thought, underworld boss, financial merchant. He calculated, all the others are ready to become my allies. Now I only need to persuade one last person. To a desolate and dilapidated place. A beggar was sitting blankly. Two male beggars were fighting for food. He approached and asked the beggar who was sitting. Hernando glanced vigilantly, while Yuri frowned and thought, she must be somewhere around here. He suddenly found someone and thought, found her. A girl was sitting washing clothes with other children. He took off his cloak and introduced, "I am Yuri, the Prince of Bryle." She was about to turn around. She asked in doubt, "Prince?" He replied, "Yes." He confidently judged, the one who ruthlessly sent Goryo off in the past. An image of the girl full of murderous intent. He thought, a surviving member of the Assassin's Guild, Asina. But currently she looks very thin and weak. When standing in front of Yuri, Anasa also did not understand why. A prince was in this place. He also spoke, "Do not be so wary of me." Yuri said his purpose. "Want to come here to help with something." Anasa looked thoughtful. Then he turned to ask Hernando for something, who was very unwilling to give. But in the end he still had to take a large bag of money, giving a tie to the prince. Suddenly Yuri's eyes showed surprise. He noticed the child who was shyly clinging to Anasa. Then remembered the previous life. She borrowed a lot of money from Goryo to treat this boy's illness. Just like those who had borrowed money from Goryo. and Asa also had her life ruined by him when she signed the loan contract. Yuri's goal now is to prevent her from becoming a notorious assassin like in the previous life. When he heard him say, "Take this money and take the boy to get treatment," and Asa also asked what Yuri wanted. He requested one thing, but introduced himself as the third prince, Yuri Bryle, in a very shining way, wanting her to remember this name. After that, he left with Hernando. When he heard him wonder, "Why did you give the money to a beggar?" Yuri said, "That is an investment for the future." Then he thought, "I have established relationships with Goryo, Elaine, and Anasa too, the people that I need in the future." Yuri's eyes at this time clearly showed determination. Then he thought, "There is one more person." Yuri turned to say to Hernando, making him surprised. He asked what he had seen in the tomb of the founding king. Hernando also happily replied, "Gambling." But he excitedly told him, "I bet my life at the Barthlegas casino in the Empire," making Yuri shocked. Seeing him so happy, he thought, "Ada makes sense. But never mind." Yuri mentioned today's matter again, and told him to keep Ati a secret. Scene changes to the castle. Yuri's father, the king, was asking Hernando about something. He asked about the matter of him going out with his son yesterday, expressing his intention to have him tell the things that happened. Hernando told him. Yuri persuaded him to leave the palace together. Then they went to a large casino in the capital. The king also wondered, "Did he gamble there?" And he replied, "Yuri did." He continued to listen, when Hernando thought Yuri was playing cards. But Ati was not, and even played away all the money he lent him. When he asked what happened afterwards, he hesitated. But he told him, Yuri took money from Goryo, then brought Ati to some old trade association. Then the prince gave a pile of money to some orphan. Afterwards they strolled around and saw how the people lived. Hernando was very happy when he said that the prince cared about their lives. The king asked again, "Did he return afterwards?" He lowered his face and pondered. But he also reported, "That is all there is." He also nodded and said, "I understand," but still had thoughts he had not said. Hernando was surprised. When he asked about the matter of him participating in the ball, he also replied, "Yes." The king thought he did not care, but Hernando said, "People's hearts change." Then mentioned that he had not danced in a long time. On the other side, Yuri was practicing swordsmanship, but was being thoroughly tormented by his teacher. He was very tired, but his reaction was quite surprised, saying Bernard was quite famous, while he himself was also surprised. Yuri said, many of the maids kept staring at him eagerly, and quite a few were waiting for Bernard to attend the ball. But this guy replied, he was not very interested, then vaguely said, "Anyway, about that swordsmanship." The prince was right. This move does not have a fixed form. Yuri stood up, confirming his words. Just move following the flow. This old man wanted to observe him fighting in Ryu combat to study, because he still did not understand how a mana method could simultaneously be swordsmanship. But he praised him for his progress, and for being good at controlling mana. Bernard did not think he was so proficient. While swinging his sword, he was remorseful for what had happened, because he had tried to erase all traces of the Bryle method he had learned in his previous life. Then Yuri was surprised when he heard him say not to rush because he was worried about the prince. He did not understand why he was worried. He said, "Because you are too fast." Yuri listened to his words. At this age he has achieved so much, while his body has not fully developed yet. He also reassured Bernard, "I will balance everything perfectly." When he heard him wanting to spar, he asked, "Are you sure?" Yuri replied, "Of course," and threw the fake sword down. He wanted to try fighting with a Ryu sword. In his thoughts he still wanted to get stronger quickly. Bernard also drew his sword, agreeing. Before fighting, he bet that if he hit him, then he had to attend the ball. Bernard refused, thinking he would win anyway. Then said if he lost he would cancel the bet, while Yuri was very angry when he heard these words. But he held the sword firmly, wanting him to just wait and see. Yuri charged at a speed as fast as the wind. The two had fought directly. He was determined to catch him, but was disappointed because he could not do a tie. Many horses were moving in one direction. A few days later, on the day of the ball, a certain prince was sitting with a girl. He asked, "Your eyes still have not left the small window," introducing himself as the second prince of the empire, Ruurgavarna Granzane. was asking Yekaterina. She was very happy, replying she had not been like this in a long time, so she was excited. The girl said she wanted to meet one more person. This was the princess of the empire, Yekaterina of Arnagranzane. In the castle, a voice asked, "How is At? Prince?" Yuri at this time was hesitating and thinking about a ball gown. He saw the gaudy decorations and wanted to take them all off. The maid did not expect he would change his mind about what he liked before so quickly. His eyes followed. When she had done what he requested, was preparing to leave, when he called her name, Ina. She unexpectedly agreed. When Yuri suggested dancing a dance, he said awkwardly he wanted to dance but did not have anyone to practice with. Ina saw that At was not necessary. Yuri was puzzled by her expression and denied At when she asked. He wanted to step on her feet and make her fall. Then he pulled her back, saying he was not joking. Ina was confused when their faces touched. Then Yuri said to follow his rhythm and go slowly. Ina's face was red with embarrassment. While practicing dancing, she still thought the prince was teasing her, not thinking the two of them were also good at dancing. In the castle, their voices were still echoing. Yuri was very annoyed because his height was being teased. The two were still practicing. He said Ina stepped on his foot, and they were very happy when reminding each other of the dance moves. During the party, many dancers were playing instruments. Many noble couples danced together to the music. Above, there was someone enjoying wine observing the party. The king was looking at everyone in this dance. The boy Yuri at this time was also standing with two other people. Suddenly, he looked at the person standing next to him. He recognized Baron Seer. He saw he was different from the other knights, which only Baron Arancha had been last time. His eyes turned to the other side, because he had noticed the glasses of that guy. Yuri spoke, seeing his eyesight was bad because he saw him wearing glasses too much, but his brother also said there was no need to worry. The horns at this time had been blown. On the side of the door, At seemed someone was about to enter. At this time, the second Prince Reorg of Arnagranian was entering with his aides. He had stopped. When he saw the king, the two shook hands, showing harmony in the party. But Reorg turned to introduce himself along with his younger sister. Yuri's face darkened when he saw her. Yekaterina bowed respectfully to his majesty. Her face was bright, exuding the style of a princess. Yuri recalled the happy past of the two people in the previous life, all of which completely collapsed with an apology letter. He told himself he could not create a close relationship with her. He absolutely could not repeat the mistake again. While his older brother was chatting with Yekaterina, she paid attention to something else. People of both countries were chatting very happily. Yuri went to another place to enjoy the cake, but still turned to exclaim, "That is really Cedric," when he had never treated anyone badly. Seeing him admired by many girls, Yuri thought this was the quality of a benevolent lord. Still thinking about himself and his brother, then he noticed Yekaterina. She looked at him wanting to say something. Then someone came to invite her to dance. Yuri was feeling foolish for having feelings for her. It was just a tragedy. The maid Ina came and asked if he wanted some cookies. She put the things down. He also spoke and thanked her, then asked about her health. Ina complained At was nothing when serving the prince every day. Yuri felt annoyed, not wanting her to say any more. The two said goodbye again. He leaned against the table and took a deep breath. Someone came to Yuri's place. He unconsciously looked up. He spoke to greet. Then Yuri realized this was the second prince of the empire, Reorg of Arnagranian. He had replaced the king commanding on the battlefield. When introducing himself as the third Prince Yuri Brial, he still did not forget the grudge that he was the one who pushed Brial to destruction. But he still tried to remain calm, not showing a clear attitude of hostility towards him. Reorg spoke to him, then smiled slightly. Yuri was feeling tense, but then looked up in surprise. He asked his age. This year was 13. Right, and exclaimed he was indeed Fyra's son. At was different. Then walked away saying, Yuri had some talent. He clenched his fist tightly, thinking when he was testing him to show his dominance. His age was still doomed, but his strength was truly unbelievable. But he cursed secretly. Those bastards. Those two people. Ina at this time had accidentally broken a glass of wine, staining Reorg's cloak. He said the kingdom's symbol was truly impolite, while she was very frightened, then turned back with a sinister face. Reorg said in a clear voice, "This child." Yuri, when he saw this scene, had a very panicked expression. Seeing him hold the sword in his body, he knew Ina had made a big mistake. He had pointed the sword at her saying, according to the law of the royal family. Then the appropriate punishment was death. Yuri felt very resentful of this bastard, because he deliberately did this to Enna. The atmosphere of the ceremony was being lit up by the brilliant lights. Enna was kneeling trembling, while those present were paying attention to Reorg pointing his sword at her and saying, "She has made a mistake." He said indifferently, according to the rules, she was extremely scared at this time. Reorg used his sharp eyes to show his authority. Execution is enough. Yuri was very angry when he heard this and gritted his teeth. Suddenly footsteps of someone approaching and spoke to diffuse the situation. "Did you come here to ruin my ball?" Floor stood upright and questioned. "If you want to see blood, then do it on your own land." Reorg glanced at his eyes. He politely bowed and said, "I apologize." Reorg explained, "Your Majesty, the Empire and Brial have respected each other until now." Floor replied, "Yes," he said with a stern voice. "Do you still remember Gadensha?" Hearing this made Floor glare warningly, while Reorg used his eyes to observe that reaction. Reorg continued, "When you executed a knight of the Empire, our Emperor respected your honor and did not require you to be responsible for that action." He intended to draw his sword and seriously said, "This is the same. I am doing this to protect the peace and honor of both countries." Yuri carefully thought. In the past, Cha had personally sent off a knight of the Empire. Floor rubbed his head, yielding and said, "I do not want to do this either. Resolve it quickly." He judged, if he mentions that right now, it means our honor is being put on the betting table. At this time Reorg had put his sword right next to Inna's neck and said, "Not much blood will be shed," making his thoughts become urgent. Stopping him at this time is no different from provoking the Empire. However, he was being suppressed by invisible things, needs and conditions, ideals and reality, reason and strength, a blazing look with an overwhelming aura, an image of a brave warrior. Told him, Brial never abandons honor, no matter what. Yuri's eyes firmly thought, that is the oath of Brial. Reorg was preparing to execute. Suddenly someone shouted, "Prince." Yuri boldly stepped forward and said, "She is my maid." But in his heart he thought, planning to weasel your way out of this. His father hearing this turned his head to look at him. He spoke, "So her mistakes are also mine." He realized, "But I had forgotten." Yuri weighed his words and said, "I am also a prince. Please consider that." His conscience gnawed at him. "In the past I was also a criminal, and in this life I have to bear I time." He accepted the truth. "From the beginning I did not have a choice." At this time Hernando and Yekaterina paid attention. Yuri confidently said, "Please withdraw the decision to execute her." Instead, he bluntly declared, "Please consider a duel." The atmosphere at this time seemed to stop. Yuri was still looking at Reorg with a serious face. He burst out laughing, breaking this uncomfortable atmosphere. Reorg accepted. "All right," and used a probing look and asked, and said, "Your name is Yuri, right?" The two faced each other. Yuri looked up and replied, "Yes, Prince," while Reorg had an opinion and said, "Can I call you Yuri?" Yuri replied, "Of course." Reorg said, "All right, Yuri." Everyone present showed hesitation. Reorg turned to probe Floor's opinion. "Your Majesty, the third prince has made a reasonable proposal, so I intend to accept. What do you think?" Floor closed his eyes and said, "Yes." He replied, "Thank you, Your Majesty." Reorg sheathed his sword, smiling and said, "I should have fought myself, but for the sake of honor, I will send someone to fight instead." He continued, "Because you are still Dung, I will choose the youngest in the royal guard." Yuri bowed in thanks. "Thank you, Your Majesty." He turned to leave but did not forget to give him a look and say a sentence. "So see you later." Ina still did not dare to open her eyes. Her whole body was trembling, holding her chest waiting for execution. Then he called her name, Ina. He sat down and helped Ina up, worrying about her. "Ina, get up." Hearing that she stammered and said, "Prince." Yuri patted her back, comforting her. "Go rest," she said with teary eyes. "But how can I, Prince?" He replied, "Do not worry about me." And then the other maids helped Ina to rest. He reassured her saying, "Do not worry about me." He turned to leave, not forgetting to see if she had left yet. Suddenly he stopped when he saw someone. At turned out to be Yekaterina staring at him. He showed displeasure and said, "All just superfluous thoughts." Then he resolutely left. Hernando, who was drinking, also glanced at him. To somewhere. Yuri was leisurely walking on the palace corridor. Suddenly he did not pay attention and brushed past Cedric. He spoke and said, "What are you thinking about?" At this time he realized and spoke in confusion. "Brother." Yuri turned around and explained, "I could not let him kill Inna." Cedric said helplessly, "You really are?" Then he stroked his head as encouragement and said, "Goodness." Yuri surprisingly looked at him. Then he smiled lightly and thoughtfully. "It's been a long time since the last time I experienced this feeling." Cedric gently stroked his hair and called his name. "Yuri." He seriously suggested, "Do you want a hand?" and reminded him, "The person you are about to face, he acts kind but in reality is completely the opposite." Remembering the conversation between Yuri and Ruurg, he worriedly said, "If the two of you are the same age, then even if there is an accident during the fight." Yuri calmly replied, "Yes, I know what you are worried about." Cedric seemed to understand and said, "Then I won't need to explain anymore. I will take care of everything." He put his hands on his hips and confidently said, "No, I started this. I will finish it." But in his heart he judged and thought, once he is determined he will do everything to deal with At. Cedric looked at his younger brother who was gradually growing up and secretly smiled. He teased and said, "I believe in you." "Yuri Bryle," he loudly replied. "Of course." Yuri wondered and asked, "But what about the ball?" Cedric turned to leave and said, "At's a bit messy right now. I will take care of At. You rest." Yuri happily replied, "Thank you." In his heart he secretly thought, if the kingdom does not collapse, then he would have ruled Bryle. He also turned to leave and was curious that he would be able to witness how Bryle would become a kingdom under his rule. In this life, he secretly resolved, I will fight so that I can witness that with my own eyes, even if I have to face anyone. The next morning the sky was very clear. Yuri along with someone were warming up for the duel. At this time there were enough people witnessing. The two people Saint and Floor were sitting seriously, while Hernando crossed his arms happily and said, "The third prince is participating in a duel." "Captain Saint, what do you think?" Looking at the opponent's appearance swinging his sword, he assessed, "The opponent's Arai is very stable. He is very proficient in swordsmanship even though he is not a knight." Suddenly the sword was stabbed hard into the fighting floor. Hernando highly praised the opponent. "The Empire's guard is truly elite." Saint turned when he saw him so calm and worriedly asked, "I do not know if the prince will be okay. Why are you smiling?" Hernando said, "Look." At this time the two were paying attention to the fighting floor. Yuri was stretching his hand and yawning because he was sleepy. Then he returned to his confident appearance. Hernando reassured, "I think there is no need for you to worry." The proud symbol of light representing the power of the Archmage. This is a level that no one can reach. In the hierarchy for mages in the magic tower, At is only sold to those who have comprehended the origin magic. Among them, the ultimate magic that can glimpse the fate of the world is called the opening fate magic. In this world, only Hernando has reached that level. Hernando, who was holding the cards, suddenly stopped. Everyone criticized him. "You were acting like you were so great just now." They mocked, "So you can't even win one round." Yuri smiled smugly, wanting to give him a hint. "Looking at your face I can tell. This is the first time he has lost money on a game since obtaining the origin magic." His eyes reflected the betting money. "Is that just pure coincidence?" "No." His expression was very smug. With just one look he could read his opponent's cards, even the flow of fate, but he could not read anything from that kid. Instead, what he saw was an illusion of Sword Mountain. He also witnessed a teenager with black hair and eyes, the symbols of Bryle, and an unmistakable arrogant look of the third prince. Even though his body was stained with a lot of blood, he kept swinging his sword and never flinched. The illusion ended when he collapsed in despair. Hernando was shocked with what he was seeing. Could it be that everything starts from there? The Sifa Terai that he once thought was a random coincidence began to revolve around a single point. All right. Keep the right attitude. However, after witnessing the erratic actions of Prince Yuri, Hernando was convinced that the fate magic could indeed be used. Hernando's face was full of certainty, affirming, "Prince Yuri is a person without fate." Saint asked in doubt, "Why are you smiling?" Hernando replied, Look, Yuri was full of confidence. He put his trust in, there is no need to worry. The opponent was still warming up. Yuri said loudly, my side is ready. How long are you planning to swing your sword in the air for? Roarg propped his chin and thoughtfully said, do you need more time to prepare? Yuri bluntly said, I can start at any time. The other side replied, me too. Floor said seriously, all right then, I announce the judgment battle begins. The two were in a ready fighting stance. A loud shout rang out, begin. Yuri took the initiative to charge and attack first, causing his opponent to stand stunned. The brown-haired Doom Man reacted in time, dodging, but was still grazed on the face, causing him to be terrified and widen his eyes. Then he gripped the hilt of his sword tightly. The two people with the same speed were constantly returning each other's attacks. The slashes were thrown very sharply. Yuri blocked the attack, stepping back and smiling lightly. The brown-haired Doom Man was still vigilantly staring at Yuri. Suddenly Floor called his name, Hernando, causing him to pay attention. He seemed to understand and replied, yes. Your Majesty. Floor with a serious face asked a question. What do you think the outcome will be? Hernando glanced, looking at the fight that was still taking place. He hesitated, looking at Yuri, who was injured at this time, but he was still determined to swing his sword fiercely to counterattack. Suddenly Hernando smiled slightly as if he knew Yuri would have his own plans. He just said, I do not know. Floor repeated, you once said that you came to Brial because AT was destined. Right? Hernando replied, that is right. Floor said his thoughts. Is AT time for you to leave now? He replied, no. An image of Saint was seriously observing, while the two knights were worriedly cheering. He closed his eyes and relaxed. I am glad to know you are not planning to leave yet. He smiled casually, expressing, you have bestowed too much honor on a lowly mage like me. I am very grateful. Floor glanced and reminded, being humble to the point of inviting disaster. I understand that means nothing big will happen. Right? Yuri changed the topic and asked, who do you think is stronger? Looking at the opponent who was swinging his sword mercilessly. His eyes were like a ferocious beast fighting with determination. Floor crossed his arms, looking down thoughtfully, and said, the opponent. Hernando also turned to look and said, AD seems you think so too. Looking at the two people who were still fighting. Hernando thought, when I first set foot in Brial, everything was completely because of the points heaven indicated. He carefully watched and made a judgment. AIT has shown me that the person who can turn the fate of the world, the strongest person on the continent, is in this place. His face was seriously thinking, but the sword has never been drawn, so I once thought I had no reason to stay. Floor said indifferently, I thought my time here had ended. Hearing this made Floor surprised, looking at the opponent jumping and rushing quickly. Yuri was still standing still as if thinking about something. Hernando assessed, but Ada seems that moment has not come yet. Yuri at this time smiled slyly. His sword at this time was radiating magic and he said, that is enough probing. Yuri sharply became agile again and declared, let us end AT. The opponent suddenly realized, he is suddenly faster. His eyes were wild like a ferocious beast. Yuri resolutely swung his sword close to the opponent's neck. His hand gripped the hilt of the sword tightly. The opponent was horrified when he saw the sword covered in magic. The killing intent radiated too much, making him think, I am about to die. Ruorg and Yekaterina were both surprised when they saw the scene above, while Floor was no less surprised. Sane confusedly exclaimed, oh my god! Hernando with satisfied eyes. Everyone exclaimed, unbelievable. He turned his sword right at that moment. The opponent's sword had been broken, while he was still standing there blankly looking at Yuri. Yuri had not sent him away but was still standing there with his sword. Then he smiled. The entire fighting floor was filled with cheers and surprise for him. The opponent declared, I concede. Hernando stood up in joy. Now I know. I came here to follow the points heaven indicated, and then met someone who challenged IT. Ruorg clapped and praised. Hernando held his ground. Life turned into death, and death turned into life, at the tip of the third prince's sword. The fate that was sold to the follower has changed along with that boy. Everyone excitedly cheered. He affirmed that, every step you take now is a resistance against the will of heaven. That is right. You are someone outside the fate of this world. Yuri was delighted to have regained the honor for his country and wiped his face with his hand. Yuri Brial. The one who transcends fate. Hernando clapped and congratulated. You are truly extraordinary. Prince. Honestly speaking, I am eager to witness. Looking at his satisfied, smiling appearance, he suddenly realized how he will continue to change the fate of the world from now on. Suddenly 5 years had passed. The maid's footsteps were a little hurried. Ah, no wonder everything is going so smoothly. She was confused. If someone caught me at this time. A loud voice. Hey you. Startled her. Joshua frowned and asked if she was new. The maid thought. That person has black hair, the symbol of the Brial royal family. What are you doing here? Joshua was still uncomfortable. The maid stammered. That. In her heart she reassured herself. Calm down. I have to answer the way the predecessors instructed. I am asking what are you doing here? Joshua said loudly. The maid still thought. If I tease someone who always has a dull face, then I tease His Majesty. I heard the Crown Prince always greets others with a gentle smile. So this definitely is not him. Those murderous eyes and that crooked walk. She was lost in thought and did not remember. This side Joshua had become angry. Are you really ignoring me? The maid said softly. His Majesty is definitely this side. Joshua listened inquisitively. Third. What? I have something to do so. Joshua angrily shouted. Do you people share a code of conduct with the royal family? In which ITs clearly stated that you have to avoid me. She hesitated. Joshua turned purple with anger. All right, that is enough. Today I will teach you people a lesson. A voice called, oh, brother. While Joshua and the maid were bewildered, that voice continued to sound. What are you planning to do this time? Looking at the figure of the man approaching her, the maid suddenly remembered. They also instructed me about one more person. If I see someone with a confident face, and is also wearing a sword on his hip, then that is. Yuri asked with a radiant face approaching. Are you bullying the maid again? After settling the matter, Yuri leisurely enjoyed the cake. Walking on the palace corridor, he remembered the matter just now. When he asked Joshua about bullying the maid, Joshua denied it angrily. The maid then gave Yuri a bag of cakes to thank him. Thank you. Your Majesty. I only have this so. He quickly brushed away the cake crumbs stuck on his mouth. The food I received from that maid was quite delicious. Yuri brushed his hands, causing dust to fly around. He secretly recalled the realm of martial harmony, a state where even while holding a sword, the pressure on the hand is still reduced thanks to the use of manhwa. He thought while looking at his hand. It seems I have reached that realm. Yuri recalled the memories from the past. He realized, 5 years have passed since I regressed. After being killed under Lawrence's sword, it seems my peaceful days are about to end. They are probably babbling enough nonsense at this time. Inside the palace at this time, Yuri quietly knocked on a door to a room, in which the sentence echoed. Are you ignoring everything I am saying? That is not it. Again a loud shout. You are the one who won't listen to what I am saying at all. The situation inside seemed very chaotic. Yuri was annoyed because he had knocked for so long but no one opened the door. The guard standing next to him saw this and soothed. It seems no one can hear you because they are completely focused on the meeting. I think you should try knocking again. Your Highness. Before the guard could finish speaking, Yuri kicked the door open. Everyone inside was surprised. Yuri spoke. Forgive me. I knocked on the door but it seems no one heard, so the second time I used a little force. The guard outside was scared. How can this be called knocking? I am going to be punished. Father, I want to participate in the meeting, Yuri suggested to his father. The king had no choice but to accept. All right, continue. The members of the Council of Elders continued to argue. Anyway, what I mean is we do not have any extra military force to support the Allied forces. Another person spoke in rebuttal. Are you saying you will ignore the request from the Empire? Then other nobles can accept instead. What an irresponsible remark. Everyone was using logic to defend their opinions. Gradually the sound of arguing from both sides kept ringing. Yuri at this time also understood. Everyone is only thinking about their own advantages and disadvantages. That is right. It was around this time that incident happened in my previous life. The call to join the Allied forces from the Empire. They requested reinforcements from many countries, and launched a large-scale attack by the orcs towards the east. However, the Allied forces failed, and in a rage, the orcs crazily broke through, putting terrible pressure on the borders of all the participating countries, all except the Empire. It was at that time that I realized that everything from the beginning was within the Empire's arrangement. While thinking, Yuri squeezed the paper in front of him. And in that process, we lost the outstanding knights who had joined the allied forces, including Lion. But in this life, I will not let things go in that direction. On top of the meeting table at this time, everyone was still arguing fiercely. Anyway, we will not send anyone. That is the end. You think we have too many knights? At least you should. Yuri spoke, interrupting. Stop. I will go. Everyone was surprised and shocked. I will join the allied forces. So you should also show your sincerity. Fulfill the duty of a noble, so that the name Brial is not slandered. The king, hearing Yuri's declaration, only silently smiled slightly. So that is a T. That is your move. After the meeting with Zhu VT, Yuri continued to practice with Bernard. Suddenly Joshua spoke, calling, Yuri. Are you really planning to join the allied forces for Re? While speaking, Joshua was panting. Yuri replied decisively, Yes. Joshua was shocked after hearing this. But why? You are royalty. You do not need to go there personally. I know what you always say. Right? Yuri smiled. It is the duty of royalty. Joshua was helpless after hearing this. All right, Yuri. Today I finally understand your thoughts. Yuri wondered. Today. Joshua changed his expression, patted his shoulder. Please return safely. In the meantime, I will protect the palace. Then Joshua quickly ran away. Yuri could only stand and watch. What brotherly affection. Truly touching. As long as he does not cause trouble, then I can rest assured. Yuri turned to talk to Bernard. Are you not planning to worry about me? As long as you do not act recklessly, I believe you will return unharmed. Thank you for your generous assessment. Bernard squinted, his face sternly warning Yuri. Even so, you still have to be careful. The orcs are not easy to deal with. They are stronger and more annoying than you imagine. Especially be careful if you meet an orc with a flag planted on its back. They are called orcful. They are especially ferocious and powerful, even among the orcs. Yuri comforted Bernard. Do not worry. I have my own way. Seeing that Bernard asked back, Do you have a plan? Before he could finish speaking, Ina pushed the door open and called Yuri. Your Highness. There is a guest who brought the thing you ordered, she said while panting. Yuri continued to speak with Bernard. A plan. Of course I do. A very special plan. The guest who had arrived was sipping a cup of tea. He sat leisurely in the large, luxurious living room. Yuri opened the door and entered. The guest stood up, politely greeting Yuri. Please allow me to pay my respects to your Highness. He was the vice president of the Elaine Trade Association. Named Guillermo. Yuri sat down and inquired, What about Elaine? Guillermo quickly replied, She is currently on the road. So I came in her place. She is still personally going everywhere. Tell her to slow down. Guillermo also could not stop her. She said that is what she is best at. Yuri also clicked his tongue and let Adi go. Oh well. Did you come here just for that? Guillermo immediately brought a mysterious box and placed Itai on the table. Of course not. I brought the item you mentioned last time. Yuri happily opened the box as if he had been waiting for At for a long time. Well done. Guillermo. Inside the box were 4 daggers, each with a unique design and exquisite carvings. Seeing Yuri interested, Guillermo curiously asked, Your Highness, is this thing really that valuable? In my eyes they just look like a few daggers for display. Yuri confidently affirmed. Very valuable. Yuri used magic to make the dagger float in the air. They are creations that carry ancient magic. Seeing the dagger fly up in front of him, Guillermo panicked. The dagger is moving on its own. Yuri reassured. He's okay. You won't die. Guillermo stammered. Are you controlling Ata with Mana? I did not know you were that strong. Can magic also be used that way? Yuri crossed his arms and looked. You thought I just eat and do nothing all day. Suddenly a black smoke flew across in front of him, causing Yuri to pay attention. Guillermo, seeing Yuri tense, asked, What is wrong? It is nothing. Anyway, convey my greetings to Elaine. Next time report to me on the preparation situation of the branch in the Empire. Guillermo knew what he meant, so he prepared to leave. Of course, then I will take my leave first. After Guillermo left, Yuri sighed and ordered, You can come on now. The black smoke began to reveal the figure of a girl. Yuri softly called her name, Asana. Then he coldly asked, What about Goryo? Asana quietly took off her mask. I sent him the warning as you instructed. I left a message right next to his head on the bed. Hearing this, Yuri had a satisfied face. Well done. He still keeps targeting Elaine's money. Asuna moved on to Yuri's matter. Your Highness, are you really going to join the Allied forces? I heard the maids say that. Yuri also lightly replied, Yes, I will go. Asuna worried, Please be careful. Yuri reassured, You say that as if I am going alone. Asuna was surprised by Yuri's words. What do you mean? You will go with me. Can you keep up with me? Asuna's eyes lit up. The corners of her mouth smiled slightly. Then she quickly disappeared, not forgetting to leave a message. Anywhere is better than where I used to be. All right. I will contact you later. A few days later, the day of re-entering the battlefield, the war flag had been waved. Yuri was preparing when suddenly Cedric called Yuri. He instructed Yuri. Take care. Yuri arrogantly replied, Do not worry. I am a failure. I will bring glory to the Brial family. Then he teased Cedric. You should also take breaks when studying. Remember to take care of your eyes. Cedric also became less tense. All right. But in that moment, he also paused, his face thoughtful. He came and hugged Yuri. See you again. Yuri also soothed his older brother with a promising sentence. Yeah, I will return. The brass horn rang, signaling the order to depart. The king floor presided Juvuk the departure ceremony. Now we will carry out the ritual. Yuri stepped step by step onto the platform placed in the middle of the great hall. His gaze showed seriousness and decisiveness, showing he was highly focused before an important decision in his life. On the ritual platform, the king asked Yuri, Are you worried? Yuri resolutely replied, Not at all. Look behind you. Yuri turned his face back. Thousands of soldiers were arranged in straight rows. All the soldiers you see here are valuable lives that you must bear on your shoulders. Yuri did not say anything, just quietly closed his eyes, his face so thoughtful that it seemed the whole world had collapsed inside. Not all of us can survive and return. However, I will ensure that they will not have to endure a tragic death like in my previous life. The king continued. Are you sure you can do it? Yes. Father. Of course. Then endure this. Right at that moment, a red killing intent covered Yuri, causing him to be dizzy. The atmosphere froze. All sounds seemed to be suffocated. The one standing in front of Yuri at this time seemed to no longer be the king floor, but the shadow of a scary person. Yuri's back stopped. Standing motionless. He was sweating profusely. His body could not move. His instinct told him that what was approaching him at this time was death. Yuri's face darkened, without any emotion. That scary person kept gradually approaching Yuri as if wanting to destroy him. If I try to avoid AT, I will die. But can't I refuse AT? A blue light appeared, symbolizing the powerful energy ready to resist death. Yuri did not hesitate, drawing his sword decisively. His eyes were sharp, shining with a brilliant blue color, his face stern, without any weak expression. His calm but coldness made people see he was ready to face any danger. Suddenly, the scenery at this time returned to a fresh green color. In front of Yuri was the king floor. The two swords of the two father and son collided, exploded, pushing both back, but their eyes still did not leave each other. The king floor happily praised Yuri. Well done. Yuri at this time was still gritting his teeth, pouring his strength to resist his father's sword. Then the king gave Yuri a small knife. This is to replace the farewell letter. I won't be long-winded. Survive and return. Yes, father. Yuri sternly turned his face to the long line of soldiers who were waiting for him below. He raised his sharp sword in the middle of the sky, powerfully declaring, I am the third prince of Brial. Yuri Brial. Put your faith in me. His eyes shone with determination. Initiative, full of faith, his face radiant, bursting with a winning momentum. A loud voice shouted, The entire army departs. Scene changes to a dark corridor. A big strong hand tightly gripped the iron bars. Eta was a monster craving food. Its eyes turned red, threatening those who fell into its sights. Baron Cider, while looking at the monster, sent a message back, So we meet again after 5 years. Third Prince. Sunlight shined brightly outside. The natural scenery was full of splendor. Yuri and his army were resting in the forest. The atmosphere was comfortable and happy. Yuri was wiping his mouth after drinking water and looked up at the person in front of him. Then he stood up and asked, 80's quite far. Raymond. How far have we gone? Raymond sat looking at the map and replied to him. We have reached the gateway to Sador. He looked at the locations marked on the map and added, after going a little further we will reach the border town of Sador. After that, we will go through Gid and proceed to the gathering point at Balshad. Hearing the knight say that, Yuri said with satisfaction, very good. Our current speed is stable. Right? Raymond replied, of course. Suddenly someone appeared behind them and called, Your Highness, causing both of them to turn around and pay attention. An evil, deadly image appeared in his head. All of this is because of you. Roland Flanger, the bastard who killed him in his previous life. This person was the eldest son of the border Marquis. Roland Flanger. He bent his knee and respectfully greeted. It's an honor to meet you. Yuri saw this and hesitated uncomfortably, saying, all right. He quickly expressed with a sincere appearance. I have something I wanted to say to your highness. From before we even met. Yuri with a wary face probed and asked him, what is it? Roland, hearing that, his eyes lit up, his face radiant, and said, I admire you. But Yuri uncomfortably did not believe it. Admire what? Roland excitedly expressed his heart. Since I heard father tell about the incident 5 years ago, your highness has become my ideal role model. He imagined Yuri's image and kept exclaiming, when you drew your sword for a maid. That is the perfect image of a true knight. Roland knelt respectfully before Yuri, his eyes shining and moved looking at him, while Yuri, hearing that, just smiled politely at him. Yuri touched his arm and laughed a tie off, saying, Right. I occasionally hear about you from your father. Lion, please cooperate well. Roland, hearing that, immediately replied, No, it is my honor to serve you. During that time, Raymond went Uviak and informed him, Your Highness, it's time to depart. Yuri replied, That is right. Raymond carefully reminded him, You should know, Baron Sador is not famous for his friendliness or enthusiasm. So even if he does not receive you warmly, do not be sad about it. Scene changes to the evening outside the castle. At this time, outside the castle there was a large banner hanging that said, Welcome, His Highness the Third Prince. Beside it, there were many soldiers standing guard and welcoming his army. Yuri saw this and sighed, smiling and saying, He is welcoming me warmly, too much even. After that, the border Marquis Sador, Haim Theodore respectfully greeted him. You have arrived. Your Highness. Yuri calmly got off his horse and politely replied, Thank you. Haim for the warm welcome. The Marquis sincerely said, We are only expressing our respect to a young person who is willing to venture to the front lines. Haim calmly asked him, Have you ever fought orcs? Yuri, hearing that, blurted, Oh, of course I have. But he quickly realized he had lived in the second life, so he changed his answer. I have not. But I have read about them. He turned his head to look at the other group of soldiers behind and continued, Most of the soldiers here also have no experience facing orcs, so we should at least learn from each other. Haim, hearing him say that, also praised, So that is it. Commendable. He bowed to him and said with a respectful appearance, Then, Your Highness, would you mind if I offered you a gift? After that, a man stood in the doorway. He held the key and opened the lock of the door. Haim and Yuri entered inside together. Haim held a torch and turned to say to Yuri, It's in here. Your Highness. He and the group of soldiers went inside. When they entered, the door gradually closed and caused him and the soldiers to be surprised. Yuri said with an uncomfortable tone, What do you think you are doing? Haim calmly explained, There is no need to be surprised. Inside, the dark cellar was being lit up by the fire. Yuri cautiously looked around. The soldiers suddenly jumped in shock when they saw something. This is an orc. A huge orc was lying in a cage like a prisoner. Haim looked at AT and said, For the time being, let us just call AT a prisoner. He looked at the trembling orc and said, To survive, I am forced to learn about them. From the smallest habits to the instinctive behaviors, everything can be used in combat. Yuri frowned and said seriously, Haim, is this the gift you were talking about? Haim smiled with a dangerous face and continued, That is right. With the war against them approaching, there can be no more precious gift than this. Yuri smiled sarcastically, replying, Thank you, sir. He thought, He is crazier than I thought, daring to torture orcs. Suddenly, he noticed something unusual about one of the soldiers behind him. Yuri turned around and asked, "What is your name?" The other person immediately replied, "I am Simon Peshu, son of Baron Wolf." He pressed him and asked, "Tell me honestly what you are thinking right now." He immediately answered honestly, "I think it is unnecessary to go this far. I think it is too cruel to prisoners of war." Yuri looked into the prison cell and spoke, "Yes, you can think that now." Then he said to Haim, "Haim, open one of the doors." He immediately replied, "Yes." Yuri turned down and said to Simon, "You said you are Simon, right?" He nodded, "Yes." After that, the foot of a huge orc stepped. He continued, "This is a Ryu battle. Fight that orc." Simon held his sword, in a defensive stance facing the orc. His eyes were wary, seriously observing The orc had a ferocious face, scary red eyes, baring its teeth aggressively. Suddenly At slammed its head hard on the ground. Simon, witnessing that scene, was both frightened and surprised. He bit his teeth tightly, frowning in fear. After that, he shouted loudly, "Sure enough, this is ridiculous. Making us fight prisoners who have lost their will to fight." At the same time, the orc rushed to grab him. Then Ata fiercely punched Simon in the face when he was not paying attention. His helmet shattered and his eyes were filled with fear. The other soldiers, seeing this, also called in fear, "Simon." The orc clamped his neck, controlling Simon. "Everyone, prepare to fight," a voice rang again. "Rest assured," Haim calmly said, "we have almost severed all of its tendons." Simon was silently listening and observing when suddenly he called him, "Your Highness." The two seriously paid attention to the front. "This is an orc." The two silently observed and Haim spoke, "Your Highness." Haim reminded him, "If you are just a little careless, Atu will immediately kill you." Simon at this time was suffocating because the orc was clamping his neck. The soldier reported, "Your Highness, we have to save him. Even so, he will be injured." The orc growled as if wanting to say or challenge something. Yuri doubtfully asked Haman, "Is Adi taking him hostage?" Haman replied, "I will call a translator." After that, a person with a strange black cloak slowly revealed their face. "Translate." Corey, a person with a scary face and fangs, stepped and observed. Yuri was a little surprised. "Corey." The other person replied, "Yes, so." Then he put his hand to his ear and began to translate. "If you do not immediately drop your weapons, At says At will start breaking every bone of the night." The fierce, scary orc still tightly gripped Simon's neck and threatened. Hernando. It was his turn. Hernando stood in front of the monster and began to cast a spell. Understood. Hernando cast magic. A stream of light emitted from his hand. He cast a spell and put his hand towards the orc. A magical aura surrounded them. Then he said loudly, "Now." Yuri, hearing the signal, turned and ran to the back and said, "Well done." After that, he went to the orc and snatched Simon from the orc, making At unable to react. Simon was safely saved by Yuri and Hernando, causing the orc to be angry. Ada stumped its foot hard on the ground. The orc widened its red eyes and shouted angrily. They looked at the orc's murderous appearance and vaguely realized something. "Haim, this is not a normal orc, is it?" Haim replied, "No. Although its body is small, its combat experience is very skilled. When we caught At was eating a night alone. That is the orc that has killed many people." A soldier there, hearing this, shouted resentfully, "That bastard. I do not care if At's a prisoner or not. I will kill At myself." But Yuri immediately went to calm him down. "Calm down." He wondered. "Your Highness." He explained, "I do not mean to stop you, but look behind him." Yuri looked at the red eyes behind and continued, "All of them are waiting for an opening. That orc is nothing special. The ones we will encounter on the prairie will be much more terrifying than these." He patted his shoulder and reminded, "Focus. This is training. Learn how to kill an orc." The huge murderous orc stood in front of them, wanting to attack the whole Giepa rep. After that, the Giepa rep of knights held their swords ready to deal with the orc. The evil orc held a box of fire and rushed to attack them. Immediately, Hernando used a magic shield to defend. The orc could not harm Yuri and Haim. The two of them still calmly observed. But at that moment, the orc suddenly vomited blood from its mouth. Adi roared in pain. A knight used his sword and stabbed the orc. Yuri, seeing that, clapped his hands in satisfaction and praised. Well done. But those knights did not look happy at all, but their faces were very sad and depressed. Do not you feel happy? He looked at the orc that was slaughtered lying on the ground and said, That is right, because this is just a test with someone who has no ability to resist. However, this experience will increase your survival rate on the battlefield. Be grateful to me. Haim raised his hand and bowed and spoke. You may think this goes against the spirit of a knight. But with these, they are not worthy of your chivalry. He walked away and continued. This way, please. I have one more thing I want to show you. The ones here are actually just a simulation. In the camps of the orcs, there are even more cruel actions taking place. A moment later, the Geepa rep stopped in front of another cellar. Haman said to Yuri, What you are about to see now is the consequence of those actions of theirs. Yuri looked seriously and thought. I understand. A soldier after showing a surprised expression. They are half orcs. Yuri looked at them and frowned, speaking. More than I thought. Huh. Haman replied to him. That is right, and creating them is not easy either. Simon was terrified when he saw that scene. Haman continued. The orcs capture humans and see them as toys. And this is a byproduct from their fun. Yuri bluntly asked him, Do you hate the orcs? His eyes avoided and spoke with hatred. I do. And I will continue to hate them until the day I die. Yuri, with an unpredictable face, quietly looked at Haman. He touched the sword on his side and secretly thought. He is calm, as if he is too familiar with this mess. Everyone has an irreconcilable enemy. With me, AT's the Empire. As for Haman, AT is probably the orcs. I heard he found his son's body in an orc village. Perhaps that scene has never faded from his eyes. Just like the way I can never forget the scene of the kingdom being destroyed. Very quickly the morning came, illuminating the entire castle. Yuri was standing admiring the morning scenery when someone came and reported. Your Highness. Haman came, and next to him was Corey. He said, Please take this one along. Yuri, seeing this, smiled and replied, He is the one I saw in the basement yesterday. He replied, That is right, his name is Corey. He looked at him and acknowledged. The ability to speak the orc language is a very valuable skill. Corey at this time suddenly spoke. Sir, I have something I need to say, but Yuri raised his hand, signaling. Stop. He said. I know, causing Corey to be surprised and not understand. Yes. Yuri gave Corey a glove and said, I know what you are worried about, so do not worry anymore. All right, now I will give this item to you. I hope you will work hard in the future. Corey held the item in his hand, saying in confusion, But something this valuable then? Before he could finish speaking, Yuri interrupted. Raymond. He asked. After this point is the border. Right. Raymond carefully presented. That is right. There will be quite a few monster packs. But you won't need to worry about being ambushed. Yuri smiled and said, No, you are wrong. Those monster packs are also a threat to the border. No different from the orcs. We have to wipe them. Oh. Scene changes to a certain forest. A geepy rep of people carrying things suddenly stopped. The sounds of horses' hooves began to ring. And something was about to appear. A group of people riding horses smiled evilly, going forward. The man holding a blood-stained sword in his hand brought 80 down in front of the people carrying things. His eyes were ferocious, cruel. After that, he sat on his horse, swung his sword and slaughtered the Jita rup of people. Red substances splattered everywhere. On the other hand, this side Yuri's Geeprup was also walking in the forest. Yuri glanced down behind, his face thoughtful. He looked at Corey and thought, A2 will be very troublesome if the unit knows that Corey is a half-orc. But he also reassured himself that, because I have given him as a subordinate to Hernando, he can probably handle AT. He remembered that his confident face. This will be troublesome. After that, he took a map and seriously looked at AT. Then he waved his hand and called. Gerald. He immediately replied, Yes. Gerald galloped up and looked with Yuri. Yuri pointed at the map and spoke entrusting. From now on you will be in charge of the reconnaissance mission. I will point to a location, and you will go check it. Gerald, hearing him speak, had a somewhat embarrassed and worried face and said, Reconnaissance? Sir, but is not that a place with monsters? Then he frowned looking at Yuri and spoke. They will run away if my unit gets close. But are you planning to go and attack them yourself? Yuri calmly replied. We will have to chase after them anyway. They are an obstacle for the merchants operating near the border. He smiled, teasingly saying, why? Do not tell me ATs because you lack confidence with your abilities. Gerald remained silent, helplessly listening to his words. I can't use the other soldiers because everyone is worried, and I am just a Dune prince lacking experience. You are a genius in swordsmanship, but if you can't even catch those criminals. Before he could finish speaking, Gerald galloped away and said, I will be back soon. Yuri happily smiled. Yeah, I know you can do AT. AT's good to see him motivated. Raymond walked next to him and spoke. You treat him quite well. Yuri, hearing that, replied amusingly. Does AT seem like AT? I just like bringing him along. Then he turned to look at Raymond, his face calm, insightful. After that he naturally said, Raymond, can I ask a somewhat bland question? Raymond comfortably agreed. Of course. Then he asked, why do you fight? His question caused him to be stunned for a moment. AT's been a long time since anyone has asked me that, but I can only give the usual answer. He said, I am listening. Raymond firmly replied, for the safety of Brial. Yuri silently looked at him. After that he smiled and thought, not bad at all. Then he excitedly said, keep the march speed. I will go visit Gerald. After that he galloped away quickly before Raymond could react. Scene changes to the huts built inside the forest, and there were a few people there. One person was tied up lying on the ground and screaming. Someone stepped Vave and ordered him. Be quiet. Yuri appeared, with a troubled face holding a knife threatening. You do not want to die, do you? During that time, Gerald looked through binoculars and reported. Your Highness, we have found them. AT's the hitty out of the robbers. He praised. Well done, Gerald. After that, he asked that person. So he is patrolling alone. Is there anyone with him? You mean your leader sent you alone? That robber quickly nodded, acknowledging. That is right. Yuri silently looked at him. He narrowed his eyes when he heard him say, I am just a regular soldier, so I do not know much information. He was curious when he saw the necklace shining on the robber's neck. After that, he snatched the necklace on his neck, causing him to be startled and shout. Yuri held it up and wondered, what is this? Is it yours? That robber indifferently replied. No, the leader told us to wear AT when patrolling. Yuri, hearing that, intended to draw his sword and interrogate. AT looks like an antique. Has AT been enchanted with something? That person was scared and immediately denied. I do not know anything. He stood in front of the robber and coldly said, Really? Then there is no choice. After that, he turned his face away and laughed, saying, I guess I will have to catch your leader and ask him myself. Not long after that, the sky had begun to turn to evening. When Yuri was hiding next to a tree and observing, there was a shout. Your Highness. Gerald came UV and reported. We have deployed troops on their escape route according to your order. We have also sent some scouts to analyze their strength. Yuri smiled with satisfaction and said, Good, so if I cause chaos, can everyone handle the rest? Gerald was confused. What? Cause chaos. Yuri climbed on his horse and signaled, Let us go. If you come late, then there will be no one left to fight. Gerald was surprised and shocked when he heard him speak. Yuri galloped away, getting on his horse, leaving Gerald, who was still bewildered. Your Highness. Please wait. AT's dangerous to go alone. Yuri excitedly galloped. Soldiers. Charge. The sound echoed to the place where the robbers were staying. The robbers there heard the sound and were curious. Huh. What is that sound? But another person who was bringing food was surprised. Immediately after, Yuri, holding his sword, riding his horse powerfully, rushed in, running you the group of robbers. While the robbers were still in shock, he said, Hello. He smiled and said with a challenging tone, You robbers. In the evening, Gerald and the soldiers rushed you Vef. Your Highness. He and Raymond were shocked when they saw the scene in front of them. Yuri was sitting on the robber lighting a fire and said, You guys are late. Gerald went UV and worriedly said, Please do not act alone. AT's very dangerous. Yuri calmly replied, Then you have to follow me properly. Raymond. What about the escapees? He replied to him. They have been cleaned up, and the casualties on our side. There are none. Yuri held a meat skewer in his hand and excitedly replied. Good. Then let us take their meat and prepare dinner. Tonight, we will eat meat skewers outdoors. Gerald looked at the meat skewer and disliked a tie. It is all fatty. Yuri shook his head teasing. You do not know how to enjoy AT. You still have a lot to learn. So today we will camp here and continue tomorrow. Sounds good. Raymond stood up and asked him, by the way. Your Highness, our next destination is Gid. Before going to the place where the Allied forces gather at Balshad. We may meet the armies of other countries at Gid because the roads are the same. He ran past him and asked, Really? Which country? Raymond replied, The Holy Nation. Yuri comfortably said, Country that uses holy magic. All right. If they are friendly, they can treat our people later. He squinted his eyes, warily replying, That is not certain. I heard the commander of the Allied forces this time is the Princess of the Holy Nation. However, there are rumors that, because she is losing power in the fight for the throne, so she is looking for military achievements to consolidate her position in desperation. So no one knows what she will do in this battle.